He should have known. That's what he'll think later, in Rome, as she sleeps beside him under a different name. He should have understood, the moment he saw her smile before that sailboat, that the rest of his life was sealed, and that it would take away everything he had ever had. He just didn't know whether it was the best or the worst thing that had ever happened to him. You are listening to a story exclusively narrated on the Dark Romance Stories channel. Relax and step into the world of love stories filled with mystery, emotions, and passion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to support us. This content is the property of Dark Romance Stories. Please do not copy or re-upload it in any form. The Beaumont Hotel ballroom glittered like the inside of a jewelry box, and Nico Ferrante hated every inch of it. He stood near the towering windows on the 42nd floor, a glass of untouched Barolo in his hand, watching Boston's harbour lights tremble far below. Behind him, 300 of the city's wealthiest people pretended they had earned their money cleanly. He knew better. He knew which judge took envelopes, which senator's son had a problem he'd buried, which developer had borrowed from the Ferrante family and was now, quietly, terrified. Power, Nico had learned by the age of 12, was simply the inventory of other people's secrets. "You're brooding," said Salvatore, materializing at his elbow like he always did, silent, grey-suited, 60 years old, and devoted to the family since before Nico was born. "People notice when the boss broods at a party." "People notice when the boss is here at all," Nico said. "I gave $100,000 to a children's hospital. Let them photograph the check and leave me alone." Salvatore's mouth twitched. "Your grandfather built this family by being seen in rooms like this, smiling, shaking hands." "My grandfather is dead." Nico set the wine on a passing tray. "And I'd like to live long enough to enjoy not being him." It was an old argument, worn smooth between them, and they both knew it would end the way it always did, with Nico staying and smiling and shaking hands, because the family did not permit him the luxury of an exit. 4 generations had built the Ferrante name into something that did not let a man simply walk away. Even the youngest boss in Boston's history, 32 years old, crowned at 28 when his father's heart gave out in a Charlestown restaurant, could not resign from a throne built of blood and obligation. He was scanning the room, calculating how soon he could vanish, when he saw her. She was standing by the silent auction tables, frowning at a framed photograph of a sailboat, as though it had personally insulted her. She wore a deep emerald dress, simple, almost severe against the room's parade of sequins. Dark auburn hair pinned up, a few strands escaping at her neck. No jewellery except small gold studs. She looked, Nico thought, like someone who had wandered into the wrong party and decided to make the best of it. Then she laughed. At her own private joke alone, a quick, bright sound, and something in Nico's chest, a thing he had assumed was scar tissue all the way through, turned over. "Who is that?" he asked. Salvatore followed his gaze. "Don't know. Want me to find out?" "No." Nico was already moving. "Stay here." She didn't look up until he was beside her. "You're scowling at a sailboat," he said. "I'm scowling at the price of a sailboat." She glanced at him, grey eyes quick and assessing, the eyes of someone used to reading people fast and being right. "Someone bid $40,000 on a weekend on this thing." I make decent money, and I couldn't bid $40 without feeling sick. Then you're at the wrong table. I'm at every wrong table tonight. She gestured at the room with her champagne flute. My hospital made me come. Good for fundraising, they said. Put the doctor in a dress. Let the donors feel charitable. She said doctor without weight, the way people said their own names. I'd rather be on shift. You'd rather be working than drinking free champagne in a 42nd floor ballroom? I'd rather be useful. She turned fully toward him now, and he felt the assessment sharpen. You're going to tell me your name and ask for mine, and we're going to do the dance, aren't we? I was hoping to skip the dance. Good. She extended her hand. Cara. Nico. He took it. Her grip was firm, warm, certain, a surgeon's hand or close to it. What kind of doctor scowls at sailboats? Emergency. The kind that sees what happens to people who buy boats and then drink on them. A flash of dark humour. You? He had a dozen answers, all of them lies, all of them rehearsed. Investments, import-export, real estate. They sat ready on his tongue, smooth as river stones. I run my family's businesses, he heard himself say, truer than he intended. That sounds boring. It is, mostly. He almost smiled. The boring parts are the best parts. A waiter drifted past, and Cara plucked 2 fresh glasses off the tray without asking, handing him one. Here, if we have to suffer through the dance, we should at least be hydrated for it. And against every instinct that had kept him alive for 32 years, the instinct that said, never trust a stranger, never want anything you can lose, never let your face show what your blood is doing, Nico Ferrante stood by a table of overpriced sailboats and let himself laugh. They talked for 2 hours. He learnt she had grown up in South Boston, the daughter of a fireman who died when she was 16, and a mother who held 3 jobs and never complained. He learnt she ran 4 miles every morning, whether she'd slept or not, that she hated cilantro and small talk, and people who tipped badly. He learned she had a brother she adored and argued with constantly. A brother in law enforcement, she said vaguely, the way people protect family they're proud of and worried about at once. He did not ask the brother's name. He would, later, give anything to be able to tell himself he didn't know to ask. She learnt that Nico listened, really listened, the way few men did, his dark eyes fixed on her like she was the only fact in the room worth knowing. She learned he was funny in a dry, controlled way, that he tipped the waiter $200 without making a show of it, that there was something behind his stillness she couldn't name, a watchfulness, a tension held so long it had become posture. She told herself it was just intensity. Rich men were often intense. It was practically a job requirement. I have to go, she said finally, when the crowd had thinned and the band was packing up. 6 a.m. shift. Let me drive you. I have a car. Then let me call you. She studied him for a long moment, and he understood she was deciding something larger than a phone number. Then she took his phone from his hand, took it, unhurried, like she had every right, and entered her number herself. Don't text me at 2 a.m., she said. I'm probably elbow deep in someone's chest. Charming. You have no idea. She smiled, and it undid him quietly, somewhere he couldn't see. Good night, Nico, who runs his family's businesses. He watched her walk away across the emptying ballroom, the emerald dress vanishing into the elevator, and Salvatore appeared again at his shoulder like a conscience he'd been ignoring. "You look strange," Salvatore said. "I feel strange." "Good strange or bad strange?" Nico looked at the doors where she'd disappeared. For the first time in 4 years, since the funeral, the crown, the wait, he wanted something for himself that had nothing to do with the family at all. "I don't know yet," he said. He should have. That was the thing he'd think later, in Rome, with her sleeping beside him under a different name. He should have known the moment he saw her laughing at the sailboat that the rest of his life had just been decided and that it would cost him everything he had ever been. He just didn't know yet whether that was the best or the worst thing that had ever happened to him. He texted her at noon the next day. "Not 2 a.m. Lunch?" She replied 4 hours later, between a cardiac arrest and a kid who'd swallowed a marble. "Can't. Tomorrow?" Tomorrow became a cafe in the North End, and the cafe became a walk along the harbour, and the walk became 3 weeks that Nico would, for the rest of his life, think of as the only time he had ever been entirely, recklessly happy. He was careful at first. Old habit. He took her to places that were public, but not too public, watched the doors out of reflex, kept his phone face down. He told Salvatore he was handling something and let the old man assume it was business. He did not bring her into his world, and he told himself it was for her sake. It was, partly. It was also that he could not bear to watch his world touch her. But the careful man kept slipping. He found himself laughing on the phone in the back of his car while his driver pretended not to listen. He found himself buying a paperback she'd mentioned, a battered crime novel, just to have read the things she'd read. He found himself, one rainy Tuesday, standing in the emergency room waiting area at the end of her shift, holding 2 coffees, because he simply could not wait until evening to see her face. "You can't just show up at a hospital," she said. But she was smiling, hair pulled back, scrubs creased, exhausted and luminous. "I brought coffee." "You brought good coffee, which is worse, because now I'm going to expect it." She took the cup, drank, closed her eyes. "God, where did you even find this?" "I know a guy." "You always know a guy." He did. That was the trouble with everything. He always knew a guy who could get a table, a guy who could fix a problem, a guy who could make a person disappear. He had spent his life surrounded by guys, and not one of them had ever made him feel the way Cara did when she fell asleep against his shoulder on his couch during a movie neither of them watched. On the 10th day, he took her to dinner at a restaurant he owned through 4 shell companies, though she didn't know that. The owner, who knew exactly who Nico was, bowed slightly too low, and Cara caught it. "Do you own this place?" she asked, half joking. "Why would you think that?" "Because the owner looked at you like you could close it down." She tilted her head. "And because you never look at the menu, you always know what's good." She saw too much. He was learning that about her, learning it with a mix of terror and helpless tenderness. She read people the way he did. It was the thing that made her so good at her work, the way she could glance at a patient and know what was wrong before they finished speaking. She was the first person in years he could not fully fool, and instead of frightening him away, it made him want to be a man who didn't need fooling. "I have a stake in it," he admitted. "Family money. Your family's businesses." She said it lightly, but her eyes lingered. "You're awfully vague about those." "They're boring." You keep saying that. She set down her fork. Nico, I'm a grown woman. I've seen things in that ER that would make you faint. You don't have to protect me from the fact that your family is rich and weird about it. Half my donors tonight made their money doing something they'd never explain at a dinner table. He looked at her across the candlelight, the auburn hair, the grey eyes that missed nothing, the mouth that had laughed at a sailboat, and he came as close as he ever would in those 3 weeks to telling her the truth. My family is the Ferrante family. We run South Boston. I have ordered men to do things I cannot say out loud. I am the youngest boss this city has ever had, and I would give all of it away to keep having dinners like this with you. The words rose in his throat and died there, not from fear of what she'd do, from fear of watching the way she looked at him change. It's complicated, he said instead. Old family, old obligations. I've spent 4 years trying to figure out how to get free of it. That, at least, was wholly true, and she heard the truth in it. She reached across the table and took his hand. I know about obligations, she said quietly. My brother and I, we're the only family we have left. He'd burn down the world for me. Sometimes that's the same as a prison. She squeezed his fingers. We don't get to pick our families, Nico. We just get to pick what we do inside them. He turned her hand over in his, traced the lines of her palm. What if I wanted to leave mine? Then I'd help you pack. She said it lightly, a joke, and laughed, and stole a bite of his dessert. But Nico held on to the words, like a man holding onto a rope in dark water. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse, the absurd glass cathedral his father had built, 50 floors above the city he controlled. And he watched the lights, and he thought, for the first time in his adult life, about a future that was not a war. He thought about Kara, waking up beside him in a place where no one knew his name. He thought about ordinary mornings, coffee that didn't have to be the best, a life small enough to be safe. It was a dangerous thing to want. Wanting was how they got you. His grandfather had said that. Want nothing you can't bury, kid. Love is just a knife somebody else is holding. But Nico was tired of his grandfather's wisdom. He was tired of being the 4th generation of a thing he had never chosen. He was 32 years old, and for 3 weeks he had been, simply, a man named Nico who knew a guy with good coffee. He picked up his phone and texted her, though it was past midnight. Not 2 a.m., but close. Are you awake? The reply came in seconds. Just got home. Long night. Why? Come to dinner Friday. The real kind. My place. A pause. Then, your place. Things are escalating, Mr. Ferrante. He stared at his own last name on the screen, the name she still thought meant nothing. Yes, he typed. They are. He didn't know that on the other side of the city, in a cramped federal office that smelled of burnt coffee and ambition, a man was pinning a new photograph to a board crowded with surveillance images. A photograph of Nico, taken 3 weeks earlier at a charity gala, talking to a woman in an emerald dress. He didn't know that the man's name was Daniel O'Brien. He didn't know the woman's last name was O'Brien too. Daniel O'Brien had not slept in his own bed in 9 days. He'd been living on the office couch, on gas station coffee, and a rage so old it had become a kind of fuel. 11 years he had spent in the Bureau's organised crime division. 6 of those years he had spent on one family, the Ferrantes. He stood before the board now at 1 a.m., the office empty around him, and looked at the new face he'd added. Nico Ferrante, 32, fourth generation. The youngest boss the city had ever seen and, Daniel had to admit it, hating the admission, the smartest. Under Nico, the family had gone quiet, cleaner. The street violence had dropped, the money had gone digital and grey and almost impossible to trace. The old man, Nico's grandfather, had been a butcher. Nico was a surgeon, and surgeons left no mess. "You think you're untouchable," Daniel muttered at the photograph. "You think because you wear nice suits and don't dump bodies in the harbour anymore that you're not what your grandfather was." He'd been close twice. Twice he'd had a witness ready to testify, and twice the witness had vanished, not killed, just gone, relocated overseas with a new bank account and a new name, courtesy of money Daniel could never quite trace back to the family. Nico didn't kill problems, he solved them. It was, in its way, more terrifying. His eyes drifted, as they had a dozen times that night, to the gala photograph. Nico, half smiling, head bent toward a woman. Daniel had requested it as part of routine surveillance of the event. He'd flagged Nico's attendance, pulled the security footage, had an analyst grab stills of everyone Nico spoke to for more than 30 seconds. Standard. He'd flipped through 40 faces without a flicker. Then he'd reached this one, and his whole body had gone cold. He knew that emerald dress. He'd seen it hanging on the back of a door. He knew that auburn hair, that profile, that specific tilt of the head that meant she was about to say something sharp. "No," he'd said aloud to the empty office. "No, no, no." He'd zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. There was no mistaking her. His sister, his Cara, standing in a 42nd floor ballroom, laughing at something Nico Ferrante had said, looking at the most dangerous man in Boston like he was charming. Daniel had thrown his coffee mug across the room. It had shattered against the board, leaving a brown stain dripping down over the array of dead and ruined faces. And he'd stood there, shaking for a full minute, before the cold, professional part of him took over. "She doesn't know," he told himself. "She can't know. Cara would never. She hates everything I hunt. She watched what this kind of family does. She watched Dad." He cut the thought off. Their father hadn't died fighting a fire. Not exactly. He'd died responding to a warehouse blaze that the arson unit later linked, quietly and never officially, to a dispute between two crews on the south side. Daniel had been 19, Cara 16. He'd never told her the full truth of it, that their father had burned to death inside a fire that men like Nico Ferrante had set over money. He'd carried that alone, the way he carried everything, and he'd turned it into a career, into 11 years, into this board. And now his little sister was on it. For 3 days he watched. He told himself it was diligence. It was cowardice. He pulled phone records, not her content. He didn't have a warrant and wouldn't get one for her, but metadata, the pattern. Calls and texts between her number and a burner that pinged off towers near the Ferrante penthouse. Dinners, a coffee run to her hospital. The pattern of a courtship. She didn't know. The more he watched, the surer he became. She thought she'd met a rich, mysterious man named Nico who ran his family's businesses. She thought she'd gotten lucky. She'd never been in more danger in her life. On the 4th day, Daniel called her. "Hey, stranger," she answered, warm, distracted, the ER loud behind her. "I was going to call you. I've been a terrible sister." "You're never a terrible sister." His voice came out rough. Kara, can you come by tomorrow? My place. I need to talk to you about something. A pause. He knew her tells the way she knew Patience. She'd heard something in him. Danny, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm fine. It's work stuff. Just come by, please. Okay. After my shift. Around 8? Another pause. Danny, you're scaring me. Good, he thought, and hated himself for it. You should be scared. It's nothing, he lied. Drive safe. He hung up and looked at the board one more time, at the grey surgeon in the good suit, half smiling at his sister, at 6 years of work, at a father who'd burned. And Daniel O'Brien did the thing that would set everything else in motion. The thing he would spend the rest of his life unsure whether to regret. He started, carefully, coldly, to build a plan in which his sister was no longer a liability, in which she was an asset. He didn't want to do it. He told himself he had no choice. He told himself it was the only way to keep her safe, to bring her inside the operation where he could watch her, where her access to Nico could finally crack a family he'd never been able to touch. Get the evidence, make the case, end the Ferrantes forever, and get his sister out, clean, before anyone knew. It was a monstrous thing to ask of someone you loved. He poured the rest of the bottle into a fresh mug and drank it standing up, looking at her face on the board, rehearsing the worst conversation of his life. It happened the same night. That was the cruelty of it, the thing Nico and Kara would marvel at later, lying awake, that the universe had chosen one single Friday to detonate both their lives. Friday, the real dinner, his place. Kara arrived at 7, fresh off a brutal shift she'd cut early, having traded a favour she'd regret to get out the door. She wore a dark red dress and her hair down, and she'd spent 20 minutes in her car downstairs, telling herself she was being ridiculous, that it was just dinner, that the fluttering in her chest was indigestion and not the growing, terrifying certainty that she was falling for this man. But first, she'd promised Danny 8 o'clock the night before, and he'd called again that morning, voice tight, moving it up. Come before, just for a minute, it's important. So she'd gone to her brother's apartment at 6, just for a minute. It had not been a minute. She climbed out of the elevator into Nico's penthouse foyer at 7:15, shaking, and he knew the second he saw her face that something was catastrophically wrong. Kara, he crossed to her. What happened? She looked up at him, this man she had spent 3 weeks falling for, and her grey eyes were wet and furious and afraid all at once. I need you to tell me the truth, she said. Right now. No more family businesses. No more, it's complicated. Her voice cracked. Tell me who you are. Everything in Nico went still. The old stillness, the killing stillness, the one he'd worn before he ever met her. Why are you asking me this? Because my brother spent the last hour showing me photographs. A tear escaped. She wiped it angrily. Of you, of your grandfather, of bodies, Nico. Bodies he says your family is responsible for. He showed me a man named Nico Ferrante who runs the Boston mob, and he showed me a picture of us at that party, and he asked me. Her voice broke completely. He asked me to spy on you. The room tilted. Nico reached for the back of a chair. Your brother, he said slowly. Your brother in law enforcement. FBI. Organized crime. He's been hunting your family for 6 years. She laughed, an awful sound. I didn't know. I swear to God, Nico, when I met you, I had no idea. I didn't know your last name meant anything. And there it was, both blades falling in the same instant. She had just learned what he was, and he had just learned what she was. Not an enemy, not a plant, but worse, more impossible. The sister of the one man on earth, dedicated to his destruction. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The city glittered behind the glass, indifferent. "Is it true?" she whispered. "What he said? Are you—" "Yes." He didn't look away. He had decided somewhere in the last 30 seconds that whatever else happened, he would never lie to her again. "I am the head of the Ferrante family. Everything your brother told you is true. The businesses, the money, the—" He couldn't say bodies, not to her, not with her father's profession sitting unspoken between them. "The history. It's all true." She made a small, wounded sound and sat down hard on the arm of the sofa, as though her legs had simply quit. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, and you never— I was going to tell you tonight. It was true. He'd decided it that afternoon. I had it planned. I was going to tell you everything and then ask you to let me leave it, to get out, with you. He laughed, bitter at the ruin of it. I had a whole speech. A speech. She put her face in her hands. God, Nico, my brother wants me to destroy you. He wants me to wear a wire. He showed me my father's— She stopped, looked up. Something hardened in her face, some decision being made in real time. He told me things tonight, about my father, about how he really died. I don't even know if they're true. He's using everything he has to make me hate you. Is it working? Nico asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Kara stood. She crossed the room to him, slowly, the way you approach something that might detonate, and she looked up into his face, searching it the way she searched a patient's, looking for the truth of the wound. That's the worst part, she whispered. It's not. And then, because there was nothing else left in the wreckage of that night to do, because 2 truths had fallen and somehow neither had killed the thing between them, she kissed him. He caught her, like a man catching something he'd been told all his life he wasn't allowed to want. His hands came up to her face, into her hair, and he kissed her back with a desperation that frightened them both. 3 weeks of restraint and a lifetime of denial breaking at once. She fisted her hands in his shirt. He backed her against the glass wall, 50 floors above the city, and the kiss turned into something that was as much grief as desire, as much I can't lose you as I want you. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "This is insane," she said. "This is the most insane thing I've ever done. Danny is going to—" "I know. He gave me a number, a handler. I'm supposed to call tomorrow and tell them I'm in, that I'll do it." Her hands were still fisted in his shirt. "Nico, I think I'm supposed to ruin you, and I think I'm in love with you, and I don't know how both of those things are true at the same time." He pulled back enough to look at her. His face, usually so controlled, had cracked wide open, and what was underneath was raw and young and terrified. "Then we tell them you're in," he said. She blinked. "What?" "You call your brother. You say yes." His mind was already moving, fast, the strategist waking under the lover. You become his asset. It keeps you safe. If you're useful to him, he protects you. He keeps the family from finding out who you really are. And it buys us time. Time for what? Nico looked at the woman he had known for 3 weeks and would have died for already. And he said the thing he had never once in 32 years allowed himself to even think. Time for me to figure out how to get us both out alive. She said yes to her brother. She sat in Daniel's apartment the next morning, hands wrapped around a coffee she didn't drink, and she told him she would do it, that he was right, that she was horrified, that she'd help him bring down the Ferrante family from the inside. Every word was a knife she was sliding between her own ribs. Cara. Daniel sat across from her, and for a moment he wasn't the FBI agent with the board and the 6 years of rage. He was just her big brother, the one who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd shown up at every graduation, who'd held her at their mother's funeral. His eyes were red. I hate that I'm asking you this. I want you to know that. I've thought about it for 3 days, and I hate it. Then don't ask, she said softly. I have to. He leaned forward. Because if I don't bring you in, you're just a civilian dating a mob boss, and the second his family finds out who you're related to, you're dead. At least this way, you're mine. Protected. Official. And we end it fast. We get enough to charge him, we pull you out, witness protection if we have to. 6 months, maybe less. Then it's over and you're safe and he's where he belongs. Where he belongs. She thought of Nico's face cracking open the night before. She thought of, I had a whole speech. What exactly do you want me to do? She asked. Keep seeing him. Don't change anything. That's the most important part. Don't get nervous. Don't pull away. He'll smell it. Daniel slid a small box across the table. Inside, a phone. Burner. Encrypted. You report to me through this, and only this. You tell me where he goes, who he meets, names, places, money. You don't take risks. You don't wear a wire unless I tell you, and I won't tell you unless it's safe. His jaw tightened. And the second you feel like he suspects you, you call me and I pull you out that night. No argument. You're worth more to me than the whole case. Do you understand? She looked at her brother and understood, with a grief that nearly undid her, that he loved her completely. That everything he was doing, even this, especially this, came from love. That he genuinely believed he was saving her, and that she was about to betray him with every breath. I understand, she said. Daniel exhaled, some terrible weight shifting off him. Okay. He scrubbed his hands over his face. I need you to know something else. About Dad. Danny, no, listen. His voice roughened. The warehouse fire. It wasn't an accident, Cara. The arson unit linked it to a turf dispute. Southside. 2 crews fighting over the docks, and one of them torched a building to send a message, and Dad ran in because that was who he was, and he didn't come out. Daniel's eyes filled. Families like the Ferrantes did that. Maybe not them specifically, I could never prove it, but men exactly like them. That's why I do this. That's why I can't let it go. Dad died for their money. Cara sat very still. She had spent half her life thinking her father died a hero in an ordinary fire. Now her brother was handing her a different father, one who'd burned in the gap between 2 criminal crews. She thought of Nico. "Did your family do this?" she would ask him later, that night, gripping his arm in the dark. "Did your family burn my father?" And he would go pale and quiet and spend a week, a real week, with real fear in his eyes, finding out, pulling old records, leaning on old men, until he came back to her and said, "It wasn't us. I swear it on my own life, Cara. It was the Donovan crew. We weren't even on the docks then. I checked everything." And she would believe him because she had learned by then to read when he was telling the truth, and because she needed it to be true. But that was later. Now, in her brother's apartment, she only nodded and let him think the story had done its work, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I'm sorry you have to do this. I'm sorry about all of it." "I know," she said. And she did. She left with the burner phone heavy in her bag and drove, not home, but to the harbour, where she sat in her car for an hour and cried until she had nothing left. Then she did the math, cold and clear, the way she did when a patient was crashing and there were 3 things going wrong at once, and she had to choose. She loved Nico Ferrante. That was simply a fact now, like a diagnosis. It did not care whether it was wise. She loved her brother. That was also a fact, older and deeper, woven into who she was. And the two of them were on a collision course, and she was standing exactly in the centre of it. And the only question was whether she could find a way for everyone she loved to survive. She picked up the burner. She picked up her own phone. She held one in each hand, the 2 halves of her impossible life, and she made the only choice she could live with. She texted Nico on her real phone. "I said yes. He thinks I'm his. We have time. I love you, you impossible man, and I'm going to get us out of this." Then she texted Daniel on the burner. "I'm in. I'll see him tonight. I'll report tomorrow." 2 messages, 2 loyalties. One woman holding the fault line of the entire city in her 2 trembling hands. She didn't know yet that being a double agent in a war between the man you love and the brother who raised you is not a position anyone survives intact. She didn't know that within weeks Nico would discover exactly what she was, and that what he did in response would burn the whole map down. She only knew that night, driving to his penthouse with both phones in her bag, that she had never been so frightened or so certain of anything in her life. For 3 weeks they lived a double life, and it was, God help them both, the happiest either of them had ever been. Cara reported to Daniel. She gave him things, real things, small things, carefully chosen. The name of a restaurant. The fact that Nico had met with a man named Russo on Tuesday. Things Nico told her to give. Feed him the small fish, Cara, the things that don't matter, the things that make you look like you're working. So that her brother would believe in her, would keep her close, would keep her safe. And Nico, in turn, fed her the small fish to feed. It became a strange, intimate ritual. He would lie with her in the dark of his penthouse, her head on his chest, and murmur, "Tell him about the meeting at the Tremont. Tell him I was nervous. Let him think he's getting close." And she would laugh, despite everything, at the absurdity of being coached by the target on what to tell the hunter. "This is the strangest relationship in the history of the world," she said one night. "Probably." His fingers traced idle patterns on her bare shoulder. I had a strange relationship once with a woman whose father I owed money to. This is stranger. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. In the half-light of the city through the glass, his face was softer than the world ever saw it. He had become, over these weeks, something she suspected no one else had ever witnessed. Undefended. With her, the boss put down the weight. With her, he was just Nico. "What was your childhood like?" she asked. "I tell you everything about mine. You tell me nothing." He was quiet for a long moment. "I was 8 the first time I understood what my family was," he finally said. "My father took me to a man's house, a man who owed us. I sat in the car. I watched my father go in and come out, and the man never came out at all." His voice was flat, distant. "My father bought me ice cream after. I remember the ice cream more than anything. Pistachio. He was very calm. He told me, 'This is what we do, Nico. We are the people other people are afraid of. It is better to be feared than to be the one who's afraid.'" Nico looked at the ceiling. I was 8. Kara's chest ached. "Nico." "I spent my whole life being the thing other people are afraid of." He turned his head to look at her. "And then I met a woman who wasn't afraid of me. You looked at me at that party like I was a person, not a name, not a thing to fear." His hand came up to her face. "Do you have any idea what that's worth to a man like me?" She kissed his palm. "You're not your father." "I've done things, Kara. I won't lie to you. Not bodies, not with my own hands, not in years, but I've decided things. I've made calls that ended lives. I run a thing that hurts people. I can't pretend that I'm clean." "I'm not asking you to pretend," she held his face. "I'm asking you to leave it. You said you wanted out, so we get you out." "It's not that simple. The family doesn't let you leave. There's no resignation letter. There's only—" He didn't finish. "There's only what?" "Death, or testimony." He said it like a man tasting something bitter. "The only 2 ways out of a family like mine are a grave or a witness chair, and both of them mean betraying men I've known my whole life. Salvatore raised me as much as my father did. Half my crew would die for me." His jaw tightened. "And I would have to put them all in prison to be free." The word testimony hung in the air, and Kara felt the first faint outline of the future neither of them could yet see. "Would you?" she asked carefully. "If it meant getting out, getting free, a life with—" She stopped, suddenly shy about the word, after everything. "With you," he finished. He looked at her for a long, long time. 3 weeks ago, I would have said never. The family is everything. Loyalty is everything. I'd have died before I turned." His thumb brushed her cheek. "But I keep imagining a morning where I wake up and no one's life depends on me, where I make you coffee, where the worst thing that happens all day is that you steal my dessert." His voice dropped. "And I think I'd burn the whole world down to have that, including myself." She kissed him then, slow and aching, and the conversation dissolved into something wordless. But the words stayed. They both knew it. Testimony. A door neither of them had known was there, cracking open in the dark. Later, much later, when she thought he was asleep, Kara slipped out of bed and stood at the glass, looking down at the city her brother was trying to clean and her lover was trying to escape. She thought about the 2 phones in her bag. She thought about the lies she was living on both sides. And she thought, someone is going to find out. This can't hold. Either Danny realizes I've flipped, or the family realizes who I am. And either way, it ends in blood. She was right. She was only wrong about who would find out first, and what he would do about it. Behind her, Nico's voice came soft from the dark. "Come back to bed." She turned. He was watching her, those dark eyes catching the city light. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. "Long enough to watch you worry." He held out his hand. "Come here. Whatever's coming, it's not here yet. Tonight, we still have." She crossed the room and took his hand and let him pull her down into the warmth of him, and they held each other against the dark with the particular desperation of 2 people who knew in their bones that borrowed time was running out. The thing about a man like Nico Ferrante was that he had not survived to 32 by being soft, and love, he was discovering, had not made him softer. It had made him more watchful, more possessive, more willing to do violence. He had something to lose now, and a man with something to lose is the most dangerous animal alive. He learned this about himself the night of the Volkov dinner. Dmitry Volkov ran the Russian organization that controlled the northern suburbs, a long-standing, uneasy peace between his people and the Ferrantes, the kind of peace that required regular dinners to maintain. Nico hated these dinners, but they were necessary, and so he went, and against his every instinct, he brought Kara. He brought her because he could not stand the thought of an evening without her. He brought her because some primitive part of him wanted to be seen with her, wanted the world to know she was his. He told himself it was safe, a public restaurant, his own men at the doors, Volkov bound by the rules of their fragile truce. He was wrong about safe. He was very wrong about Volkov. The Russian was a large, smiling man with cold eyes and a habit of standing too close, and the moment he saw Kara, those cold eyes warmed in a way Nico did not like at all. "Ferrante," Volkov boomed, kissing Kara's hand and holding it a beat too long. "You did not tell me you had acquired something so beautiful. Where have you been hiding her?" "She's not acquired," Nico said, his voice pleasant and his eyes flat. "She's a guest." Of course, of course." Volkov did not release her hand. "Doctor, yes? Emergency medicine? Fascinating work." "You must tell me. You're holding my hand too long," Kara said, smiling sweetly, and withdrew it with a surgeon's precision. "Occupational hazard. I notice circulation." Volkov laughed, delighted, and Nico felt something hot and dangerous uncoil in his chest. Dinner was a performance of civility laid over a current of menace. Volkov directed too much attention at Kara, questions, jokes, the constant low pressure of a powerful man testing whether a thing he wants is available to be taken. Nico sat and watched and said little, and Salvatore, seated to his left, murmured under his breath, "Easy. He's doing it on purpose. He wants to see you crack." "I know what he's doing," Nico said quietly. "Then don't give it to him." But when Volkov leaned in close to Kara, his hand drifting to the back of her chair, his mouth near her ear to say something Nico couldn't hear, and when Kara's smile went tight and her eyes flicked to Nico with a flash of "get me out of this," something in Nico simply stopped pretending. He stood. The whole table went silent. He walked around to Kara's side, unhurried, and put his hand on her shoulder and looked down at Dmitry Volkov with an expression that emptied the warmth from the Russian's face like water from a cracked glass. "Dmitry," he said softly, "we've known each other a long time. So I'm going to say this once, as a friend." He let the silence stretch. "You're going to take your hand off my woman's chair, and you're going to remember, every time you look at her, that she is the single thing in this world I would end our peace over. Do you understand me?" The restaurant had gone utterly still. Volkov's men shifted. Nico's men shifted. The truce hung on a knife's edge. Then Volkov laughed, a real laugh this time, almost admiring, and lifted both hands in surrender. "Forgive me, I forget myself around beauty." He sat back. "You are a lucky man, Ferrante, and a careful one. I had heard you'd gone soft. I see now you've simply gone quiet. Those are different things." "Very different," Nico agreed, and sat back down, and the dinner resumed, and the peace held. Barely. But in the car afterward, the mask came off. "You can't do that," Kara hissed, furious and shaken. "You can't square off with a Russian mob boss over a man touching my chair. People could have died, Nico. Your men, his men." He was going to keep pushing. Nico's jaw was tight, his hand white-knuckled on his knee. Men like Volkov push until someone stops them. I stopped him. By threatening to start a war, by making it clear what you cost. He turned to her, and there was something raw and almost frightening in his face. "I don't know how to do this halfway, Kara. I've never had anything I cared about. My whole life I made sure of that, because caring is a weakness they use against you. And now there's you, and I find that I would burn it all. The truce, the peace, the family, all of it, before I'd let a man like Volkov so much as breathe on you." He looked away, ashamed of the intensity, unable to stop it. "It's not romantic, it's pathological, I know that." Kara stared at him. The fury drained slowly out of her, replaced by something more complicated. She had wanted, all her life, to be loved fiercely. She had not understood until this moment that fierce love came with teeth. "It scares me," she admitted quietly. "Not you. That. How much you'd risk." "It scares me too," he said. "I've never had this much to lose." She reached over and took his clenched hand and slowly uncurled his fingers, one by one, and laced hers through them. "Then let's make sure we lose nothing," she said. "Promise me, no more wars over chairs. We're getting out, Nico. We're getting out, and we're going somewhere no Volkov and no Donovan and no FBI can find us, and you're going to learn to be jealous about something safe, like me flirting with the barista." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I'd kill the barista. You're hopeless." "For you," he said, and lifted her hand to his mouth, completely. But over Kara's shoulder, through the rear window, Nico's eyes tracked a black car that had been 3 lengths behind them since the restaurant. He said nothing. He squeezed her hand and smiled and filed it away, the cold part of his mind never sleeping. Someone was following them, and it wasn't the FBI. The FBI followed at a distance, careful, by the book. This car was sloppy, aggressive, family. His own people were watching him, and that meant his own people had started to wonder. The pressure came from both directions at once, the way it always would now. Daniel wanted more. Small fish weren't enough anymore. He'd taken Kara's intelligence to his superiors, and they'd been unimpressed. Names without context, meetings without content. The US attorney wanted evidence. Recorded conversations, Nico Ferrante's voice on tape discussing crimes. "I need you to wear a wire," Daniel said. They were in his apartment again. Kara felt the floor drop out from under her. "You said you wouldn't ask me to do that unless it was safe." "It's safe. It's a new model. Subdermal, basically. Looks like a nicotine patch. He's not going to find it unless he's strip-searching you, and—" Daniel grimaced. "I don't want to think about that." "Danny, one conversation, Kara. One. Get him talking about something real. The Russo thing, the money laundering through the restaurants, anything. Then we charge him and you're done and you're out." Daniel's eyes were bloodshot, manic with the nearness of 6 years' obsession. "We're so close. I can feel it. One recording and I end this family forever." Kara looked at her brother and saw, clearly, that he had stopped being entirely rational. The case had eaten him. He could not see her anymore, only the door she could open. She took the patch. That night, she sat in her car outside Nico's building for 45 minutes, the wire a small, cold weight under the strap of her dress, and she fell apart. Quietly. Completely. Because she understood that she had reached the edge of the thing she could do. She could feed Danny small fish forever, but a wire, in Nico's own home, recording his voice, that was a line. And once she crossed it, there was no version of this where everyone lived. So she didn't cross it. She took the patch off in the car. She drove to a 24-hour pharmacy, bought a real nicotine patch, and stuck that on instead. A decoy, in case Danny ever checked. Then she went up to the penthouse, and the moment the doors opened and she saw Nico's face, she started to cry. "Kara." He was across the room in an instant. "What is it? What happened?" "I have to tell you something, and you have to not get angry," she sobbed into his chest. "Promise me. Promise you won't do anything insane." "I can't promise that. Tell me." So she told him. The wire, the pressure, Daniel's obsession, his bloodshot eyes, the way the case had hollowed him out. She told him she'd taken the wire off, that she couldn't do it, that she would not be the instrument of his destruction, even to save herself. And Nico Ferrante held the woman he loved while she cried, and over her head his face went through something profound and irreversible. Because in that moment he understood 3 things with total clarity. The first, that Kara loved him more than her own safety, more than her brother, more than the law. She had been handed the perfect weapon against him, and she had thrown it away rather than use it. The second, that this could not continue. The fault line couldn't hold. Daniel would push harder. The family was already watching, already suspicious. Sooner or later, weeks, maybe days, someone on his side would dig into the doctor the boss was suddenly inseparable from, and they would find her last name, and they would find her brother, and they would not care that she'd refused the wire. They would only see an FBI agent's sister in the boss's bed, and they would draw the obvious, fatal conclusion, and they would kill her to be safe. And the third thing, the thing that settled over him like a verdict, there was only one way out. The door he'd told her about in the dark. A grave or a witness chair. He would not take the grave, and he would not let her die for his name. He held her until she'd cried herself quiet, and then he tilted her face up and wiped her tears with his thumbs and said very calmly the thing that would change everything. "I'm going to fix this." "You can't fix this, Nico. It's not. I'm going to go see your brother." She went rigid in his arms. "What?" "Not with men, not with threats." His voice was eerily steady, a man who had finally seen the only path. "I'm going to walk into your brother's office, alone, unarmed, and I'm going to make him a deal he cannot refuse." "He'll arrest you. He's been trying to arrest you for 6 years." "Let him." Nico almost smiled. "Cara, listen to me. Your brother wants the Ferrante family. He wants the men above me, the old council, the ones who really run the money, the ones I answer to. The men who would kill you the moment they learned who you are." His hands tightened on her. "I'm going to give them to him. All of it. The accounts, the names, the roots, the bodies. Everything I've spent 32 years protecting. I'm going to hand it to the FBI on a silver plate." "Why would you?" "In exchange for 2 things." He looked at her like she was the only fixed point in a spinning world. "Your freedom. A guarantee, in writing, that you walk away clean, that you are never an informant, that your name never appears in any of it. And a way out, for both of us. New names, a new life, somewhere far from here." Cara stared at him, the enormity of it crashing over her in waves. "You'd give up everything," she whispered. "Your whole world, your family. You'd put men who raised you in prison. You'd become the one thing your kind hates most, a rat. For me?" Nico Ferrante, 4th generation, the youngest boss in Boston's history, looked at the Irish doctor who had walked into a charity gala and accidentally saved his life, and he said the truest thing he had ever said. "I've spent my whole life being feared. I'm tired of it." He kissed her forehead. "Let me spend the rest of it being yours." Daniel O'Brien was alone in the office at 9 p.m. when the front desk called up, voice strange, and said there was a man downstairs who wanted to see him. "His name's Ferrante," the desk officer said. "Nico Ferrante. He says he's unarmed. He says, and I'm quoting him, sir, he says he's here to surrender his entire organization, and he'll only talk to you." Daniel sat very still for a long moment. Then he stood, checked his weapon, called for 2 other agents to stand by, and went down to the lobby. Certain it was a trick, a trap, a power play of some kind. Men like Ferrante did not walk into FBI buildings. It wasn't done. But there he was, standing in the harsh fluorescent light of the federal lobby, hands visible, dressed in a simple dark suit, no entourage, no lawyer, no weapon, just a man. He stood with the bearing of a man who had decided something and could not be moved. "Agent O'Brien," Nico said. "I think you've been waiting a long time to meet me." Daniel had imagined this moment for 6 years. In his imagination, it involved handcuffs, a confession dragged out over weeks, the satisfaction of watching arrogance crack. He had never imagined this. The man simply there, hands open, offering himself. "Search him," Daniel said. They searched him. No weapon, no wire, no phone, nothing but the suit on his back and a single thumb drive in his breast pocket, which an agent held up between two fingers like something venomous. "That's for you," Nico said, "but not yet. First we talk, privately." "You don't give orders here." "No," Nico agreed. "I don't give orders anywhere after tonight. That's rather the point." They put him in an interview room. Daniel stood against the wall, arms crossed, two other agents watching through the glass, a recorder running. And Nico Ferrante, the most dangerous man in Boston, sat down at the metal table, folded his hands, and began to dismantle his own life. "I'm going to tell you who really runs the Ferrante family," he said. "It's not me. I'm the face, the name on the door. Above me, there's a council, 5 men, old money, the ones who launder it, the ones who decide. My grandfather built it that way, so no single arrest could end us. You've spent 6 years trying to climb to the top, and the top isn't where you think it is." He nodded at the thumb drive in the evidence bag. Names, accounts in 3 countries, the shell companies, the routing, 2 unsolved homicides with the men who ordered them, enough to put all 5 of them away for the rest of their lives, and 40 others besides. Daniel's mouth had gone dry. This was, if it was real, the single greatest organized crime breakthrough in the history of the Boston field office. The case of a lifetime. The case of 10 lifetimes. "Why?" he said. It came out cracked. "Why would you do this?" Nico looked at him steadily. "Because of your sister." The room went cold. Daniel uncrossed his arms. "You leave her out of your mouth. She refused to wear the wire," Nico said quietly. "You gave it to her tonight. She took it off in her car. She bought a fake one from a pharmacy in case you checked. She would rather have you think she failed than help you put me away." He let that land. "She loves me, Agent O'Brien, and I love her more than I have ever loved anything, including my own life, which is the only reason I'm sitting in this chair. So before you decide what to do with me, you should understand exactly what I'm offering and what I'm asking for in return." Daniel's hands had curled into fists. Everything in him, 6 years, his father, the board, screamed that this was a manipulation, that the man was using Kara as leverage. But there was something in Nico's face he couldn't make fit that theory. He had interrogated 1,000 men. He knew the difference between a man playing a card and a man telling the truth and hating that it was true. "What do you want?" Daniel said. 3 things. Nico held up a finger. 1. Your sister walks away completely clean. She was never an informant. Her name appears in no file, no report, no testimony. As far as the world will ever know, she was a doctor who dated a man and didn't know what he was. You will swear to that, in writing, and you will protect it with everything you have. Because the day her name surfaces is the day the council's friends kill her. And believe me, they have friends everywhere, including, possibly, in this building. Daniel's stomach turned, because he knew it was true. There were leaks. There were always leaks. 2, Nico continued, I testify, fully, against the council, against the family, against everyone. But I do it as a cooperating witness, with the protection that comes with that. Witness security, new identity, the full program. And 3? Nico's composure flickered just slightly for the first time. She comes with me, into the program, wherever they put me, A new name for her too, beside mine. He met Daniel's eyes without blinking. I know what I'm asking. I'm asking you to lose your sister to keep her alive. She can never come back here. You can never see her except how the program allows, and it allows almost nothing. I'm asking you to choose between having her near you and having her breathing. His voice dropped. I've done the math 100 times. There's no version where she stays in Boston and lives. The moment my family realizes who she is, and they will, they're already watching me. She's a loose end. I can't protect her here. Nobody can. The only way out for her is out of this life entirely. With me, because she won't go without me, and because... He stopped. Because I won't go without her. Silence. Daniel turned away. He walked to the glass and looked at his own reflection, and at the two agents beyond it, pretending not to watch. And he thought about his sister's face that morning when she'd said, "Don't ask." He thought about her crying at their mother's funeral. He thought about teaching her to ride a bike on the cracked sidewalk in Southie. Running behind the seat, letting go, letting go. You're asking me to never see her again, he said, not turning around. I'm asking you to save her life. The seeing her part, that's just the price. And you get to ride off into the sunset with her. The man who burned my father's city to the ground. Nico was quiet a moment. Your father died in a fire on the South Docks. A turf war between the Donovan crew and a Vietnamese outfit over container space. The Ferrantes weren't on the docks in those years. My grandfather had pulled us out after a federal sweep. I checked the records myself. I checked them for Cara, because she asked me, because she needed to know. It wasn't us, Agent O'Brien. I'm not going to pretend my family never killed anyone. We did. I won't insult you. But we didn't kill your father. He paused. I can put the Donovan men who set that fire on the same thumb drive. If you want them. Consider it a gift. Daniel stood at the glass for a very long time. When he finally turned around, his eyes were wet and his jaw was set, and he looked 10 years older than he had that morning. If you're lying to me, he said, if any part of this is a play, if you hurt her, ever, if you so much as, I won't. If you do, Daniel said, there is no program deep enough. There is no name far enough. I will find you. Do you understand me, Ferrante? Nico Ferrante looked at the brother of the woman he loved, and for the first time all night he smiled. A real, exhausted, almost grateful smile. I'd expect nothing less, he said. Now, do we have a deal? It took 3 days to build the deal, and they were the longest 3 days of Cara's life. She wasn't allowed in the room. The negotiations happened in a secure facility. Nico, a federal prosecutor, 2 agents who weren't Daniel, he'd been forced off the formal proceedings the moment his relationship to a key witness's partner came to light, and a defense attorney the government had to provide. Cara waited in a safe house, a beige nothing apartment with the blinds drawn and an agent outside the door, and she paced, and she did not sleep, and she imagined every way it could go wrong. Nico called her each night on a monitored line. He couldn't say much, but he said enough. It's holding, he told her the first night. They want it. They want it so badly it scares me. The prosecutor looked at the thumb drive, and I thought she might cry. Are you okay? A pause. I betrayed my whole family today, Kara. I gave a federal prosecutor the names of men who held me at my baptism. His voice was hollow. Salvatore. I gave them Salvatore. The man taught me to drive, taught me to tie a tie. He's going to die in prison, and it's because of me. She pressed the phone to her ear. Nico, don't tell me it's okay. It's not okay. It's the right thing, and it's the only thing, and it's also the worst thing I've ever done. A long breath. But then I think about you in that safe house, and I think about a morning in some city where no one knows us, and I do it again. I keep doing it. I'll do it as many times as they ask. The second night, his voice was tighter. The family knows something's wrong. I've gone dark for 3 days. Salvatore's called 40 times. The council's called. They know. A grim pause. It's a matter of time before they figure out what. We have to move fast. The third night, the deal was done. Full cooperation, complete testimony before a grand jury, and then at trial. In exchange, immunity for Nico on everything except a single financial count he'd plead to, with no jail time given his cooperation, total protection under the witness security program, and, sealed, ironclad, signed by the US Attorney herself, Kara O'Brien's absolute exclusion from every record, every file, every word of testimony. She had never existed in this case. She was a doctor who'd dated a man. Nothing more. And one name added to the protection. Kara, relocated with him. 2 new lives, 1 apartment, 1 future, somewhere across an ocean. It's done, Nico told her on the third night, and she could hear that he was crying. This man she'd never seen cry. It's done, Kara. We're out. We're actually out. She sank to the floor of the beige apartment with the phone against her face and wept with relief. It should have been the end. In a kinder story, it would have been the end. The deal signed, the future secured, the lovers safe. But the council had not survived 4 generations by being slow. They figured it out on the 4th morning, before the arrests, in the narrow window between Nico's signature and the FBI's coordinated takedown. A leak. One of the friends Nico had warned about, a clerk, a cop, someone with a debt to the family, whispered 3 words into the right ear. Ferrante is cooperating. And the council, in an emergency meeting in the back of a Revere social club, did the only thing 4 generations of instinct knew how to do with a traitor. They issued the order. Not just for Nico, the leak had been thorough. It had included a name, finally, the name the family had somehow never connected before. The doctor, the boss's woman, O'Brien, sister to the federal agent who'd hunted them for 6 years. To the council, it was suddenly, sickeningly obvious. Nico hadn't fallen for a woman, he'd been turned by one. A federal honeypot, a plant. They'd been infiltrated at the highest level, and they hadn't even seen it. The order came down in the old language, the way it always had. Both of them, tonight, make it clean. Salvatore took the call. The old man who had taught Nico to drive, to tie a tie, who had loved the boy like a son. Salvatore took the order, and he was quiet for a long moment, and the council heard him sigh. "He's still my boss," Salvatore said. "He's a rat," the eldest of the council said. "He gave us to the FBI. There's no boss anymore, Sal. There's just a problem. Solve it, or you're part of it." Salvatore hung up the phone. He sat in his car for 10 minutes in the grey Revere morning. Then he made a different call. Nico's burner buzzed at 6:14 a.m. He was in the federal safe house, packing the single bag they'd allow him, when he saw the name, and his blood went cold. Salvatore. They know, the old man said, without preamble. His voice was rough, ancient, grieving. Everything. That you talked, that she's the agent's sister. The council met an hour ago. A pause that contained a lifetime. The order's out, Nico, for both of you. They're not waiting for the arrests. They're coming today. Nico gripped the phone. Sal, I'm supposed to be the one who does it. A terrible, wet sound, almost a laugh. 40 years I served your family, and they hand me the boy I raised and tell me to put him in the ground. The old man's voice cracked completely. I can't do it, Nico. God help me. I can't. So I'm calling instead. I'm calling to tell you to run. Right now. Don't wait for your federal friends to organize their program. By tonight, there'll be people who can't be stopped. Take her and go. You've got hours, not days. Sal, the FBI can protect. The FBI has leaks. That's how the council found out, Nico, from inside your protection. You think the program is safe right now, today, with the order this hot? You'll be dead before the paperwork clears. A breath. Get in a car. Drive. Get to where they can't reach in the next 48 hours and let your federal friends catch up to you somewhere safe. Trust no one in between, not even them, especially not the ones who are supposed to be guarding you. Nico closed his eyes. Why are you doing this? They'll kill you for this call. Silence on the line. Then, softly, because I held you when you were an hour old, Salvatore said. And a man should be allowed one thing in his life he won't do, even for the family. A pause. Go, Nico. Take your doctor. Be happy somewhere I'll never know about. Don't call me again. The line went dead. Nico stood in the safe house, the bag half packed, the grey light coming through the blinds, and he understood that the deal that was supposed to save them had instead lit the fuse. They had hours. They had a car. They had each other and a head start measured in minutes. He picked up his phone and called the one number that mattered. Cara, he said, get dressed, now. We're leaving in 10 minutes, and I need you to do exactly what I say. The rule, when you run, is that you cannot trust anything you would normally trust. Nico knew this the way he knew his own pulse. It had been bred into him. So when the FBI handler arrived at the safe house at 6:40 a.m., early, unscheduled, too early, and knocked with a pattern that was a beat off from the one they'd agreed on, Nico did not over the door. He took Kara's hand, put a finger to his lips, and led her out the back, down the fire escape, into the alley, while the handler kept knocking. That was your handler, Kara whispered, terrified, as they moved fast and low between dumpsters. Why aren't we? He came early, and he knocked wrong. Nico's eyes scanned the street ahead. Salvatore said the leak is inside the program. I'm not betting your life that it isn't him. They came out onto a side street where a car was waiting. Not a federal car, not a family car, but an anonymous grey sedan Nico had arranged through a man who owed him a favour older than the FBI's involvement, a man with no connection to either side. the last clean favour he had in the world. He'd called it in the moment he hung up with Salvatore. "Get in," he said. "Back seat. Down." She got in. He drove. For the first hour they didn't speak. Nico drove like a man who had been trained to drive like this. Surface streets, then highway, then off the highway, then a different highway, never a straight line, his eyes more on the mirror than the road. South, then west, then south again. Kara crouched in the back and watched him become someone she'd never quite seen. Not the lover, not even the boss, but something older and colder underneath both. The survivor the family had forged. "Talk to me," she finally said. "Where are we going?" "South. Away from the city. Away from anyone who'd think to look in the obvious places." He checked the mirror. "The order's local. Boston, the council's reach. The further we get, the thinner it stretches. We need to put real distance between us and them in the first day before they can organise a real hunt. After 48 hours, the heat drops. The order goes from urgent to standing. That's the window we're driving for." "And then what?" "Then we surface. Somewhere far. We call the prosecutor directly. Not the handler, not the program, the prosecutor herself, the one whose name is on the deal. We tell her the program's been compromised, and we get pulled in clean, somewhere the leak can't reach." His jaw was tight. "It's thin, Kara. I won't lie to you. There are 100 ways this goes wrong." "But there's a way it goes right." He glanced at her in the mirror. "There's a way it goes right." They drove. The city fell away behind them, then the suburbs, then the grey nothing of the interstate. Kara watched the mile markers and thought about her brother, who didn't know yet that the people he'd trusted to protect her had instead nearly gotten her killed. She thought about how she would never see him again, not really, not the way you see a brother, and the grief of that sat in her chest beside the terror, 2 stones, while the highway unspooled. "Danny doesn't know they came early," she said suddenly. "He doesn't know the program's leaking. If they think they can't reach us, they might go after him." Nico's hands tightened on the wheel. He'd thought of it already. "Your brother is a federal agent with a building full of armed friends. He's the hardest target in the city. They want clean kills, Kara, a doctor and a runaway boss who vanished, not a war with the Bureau. Killing an agent brings down 100 times the heat." He met her eyes in the mirror. "He's safer than we are, and the second we surface clean, the arrests happen, and the council goes down, and there's no one left to give orders. That's the whole game. We survive 48 hours, the indictments drop, and the family that wants us dead stops existing." It was thin comfort, but it was comfort, and she took it. They stopped once, at a sprawling truck stop off the interstate, the kind of anonymous place where 1,000 strangers passed through and no one remembered a face. Nico made her wait in the car while he went in, paid cash for gas and food and 2 prepaid phones, kept his head down, kept his hands easy. He'd worn a cap and glasses. He looked, Kara thought when he came back, like nobody. A man in his 30s on a road trip. Forgettable. It was a skill, this forgettableness, and it chilled her to see how good he was at it. "Eat," he said, handing her a sandwich. "You haven't eaten since yesterday. I need you sharp." She ate. The food was terrible, and it was the best thing she'd ever tasted, the way food is when you've been running for your life since dawn. "Tell me something," she said, between bites. "Tell me something normal. I need to remember there's a normal." So he did. As he pulled back onto the highway and the afternoon light went gold and long, Nico Ferrante told her about Rome. My great-grandmother was from Trastevere, he said, across the river from the old centre. Narrow streets, cobblestones, laundry strung between the buildings. She came over at 16, and she never stopped talking about it. The light, she said. Roman light is different, softer, older. She'd close her eyes and describe the way it came down the alleys in the evening. He smiled faintly, the survivor receding, the man returning. My grandfather built an empire in a city of cold grey water, and his mother spent her whole life homesick for warm yellow stone. I used to think she was foolish. Now I think she was the only one of us who understood anything. "Is that where you'd go?" Kara asked softly. "If you could pick, if the program let you pick." He was quiet for a moment, watching the road. "It's where I'd go," he said. "It's the one place on earth that's ours and isn't the family's." My grandfather never went back. None of them did. There's no Ferrante operation in Rome, no debts, no men who'd know my face. Just a city my great-grandmother loved, and a name that means nothing there. He glanced at her. "I've never told anyone that I'd want to go home to a home I've never seen." Kara reached forward from the back seat and put her hand on his shoulder, and he covered it briefly with his own before returning both hands to the wheel. "Then we'll ask for Rome," she said. "When we surface, when it's safe. We'll tell the prosecutor, Rome or nothing." "It doesn't work like that. They put you where they put you. Then we'll make it work like that." She squeezed his shoulder. "You handed them the biggest case of their lives, Nico. You gave them a thumb drive worth 10 careers. They owe us a city." "We're going to ask for the right one," he laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him, the first since dawn, and shook his head. "You negotiate like you're going to get your way." "I usually do. I'm beginning to learn that." They drove into the dark. The first day burned down toward its end, mile marker by mile marker, and the grey sedan carried them south through a country that had no idea two people inside it were running from an order written in a language older than the law. Behind them, in Boston, the leak was working, the council was hunting, and somewhere a man who'd refused to kill the boy he raised was waiting for a knock on his own door that he knew was coming. Ahead of them, hundreds of miles off and across an ocean, a city of warm yellow stone sat in its evening light, not knowing it was about to receive two strangers with new names and old wounds, and a love that had cost them everything they'd ever been. But that was ahead. Tonight there was only the road, and the dark, and the two prepaid phones in the glove box, and a window of 48 hours that was already, minute by minute, narrowing toward the moment they would have to surface and gamble everything on a single phone call to a woman whose name was on a deal. "Get some sleep," Nico said, as the highway emptied and the night closed in. "I'll drive through. I'll wake you if anything changes." "You haven't slept either." "I don't sleep when I'm hunting," he said, "or when I'm hunted." "Old habit. It's kept me alive." He found her eyes in the mirror, and his voice gentled. "Sleep, Kara. I've got us. I swear to you, I've got us." And because she trusted him, because despite everything, against all sense, she trusted this dangerous man with her life, and had been right to, she curled up in the back seat of a stolen, clean sedan somewhere in the dark middle of the country, and she slept. Nico drove on through the night, watching the mirror, his jaw set, the woman he loved breathing soft behind him, and he made a quiet vow to the dark that whatever it cost, whoever it cost, she would live to see the warm yellow light of a city his great-grandmother had wept for and never seen again. They couldn't drive forever. By the second night, Nico's hands had started to shake, not from fear, from exhaustion, 36 hours without sleep. And he knew that a tired man makes mistakes, and a mistake now meant death. So he did the thing he hated. He stopped. He chose a motel the way he chose everything now, by its forgettableness. A low cinder-block strip off a state highway, no cameras he could see, cash only, a clerk who didn't look up from his television. Nico paid for one night, used a name that wasn't his, parked the car around the back where it couldn't be seen from the road, and brought Kara inside. The room was exactly what you'd expect. 2 sagging beds, a bolted-down TV, a window unit that rattled. Kara had never been so grateful for a room in her life. "Sleep," she told him, the moment the door was locked and chained. "You first, 4 hours. I'll watch." "You don't know what to watch for." "Then teach me." She sat him down on the edge of the bed and crouched in front of him, taking his shaking hands in hers, and she looked at him with the steady gaze she used on patients who were about to argue with her about something that would kill them. "Nico, you've been running on nothing for a day and a half. You're a doctor's worst nightmare right now. Adrenaline, no sleep, no real food. You're going to crash whether you want to or not, and I'd rather you crash on this bed for 4 hours than at the wheel doing 80. Lie down. Tell me what to watch for. I'll wake you if anything moves." He looked at her for a long moment, this woman who was supposed to be the soft thing in his life, kneeling in a motel room, telling him to surrender like a field commander. And he understood, not for the first time, that he had fallen in love with someone every bit as hard underneath as he was. "Headlights that slow down," he said quietly. "Any car that passes more than once. A man on foot. Nobody walks out here. The clerk leaving his desk. Anyone who looks at our car." He nodded toward the window. "Keep the light off. Watch through the gap in the curtain. Don't touch it. If anything looks wrong, you wake me. You don't investigate. Promise me." "I promise." "And if it goes bad?" He reached into his jacket and pressed something into her hand. A phone and a folded piece of paper. "That's the prosecutor's direct line. Her name's Reyes. If something happens to me, you don't run, you don't hide, you call her, you say my name, and you tell her everything. She'll move heaven and earth because the case dies with me, and she knows it. You're worth more alive than I am. Remember that." Kara's throat closed. "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Probably not." He almost smiled. "But I've stayed alive 32 years by planning for the version where it does." He lay down. He was asleep in under a minute, the way soldiers and surgeons and hunted men sleep. Instantly, completely. A body taking what it could while the taking was good. And Kara sat in the dark by the window, the prosecutor's number folded in her fist, and watched the empty highway through a 2-inch gap in the curtain. For 3 hours, nothing. The night passed in slow waves. A truck, headlights steady, not slowing. A car, faster, gone. The neon sign buzzing. Moths against the glass. She watched the man she loved sleep, his hard face gone slack and young, and she let herself imagine, just for a few minutes, the city of yellow stone. A small apartment, a market in the morning, Nico learning to be a person who wasn't afraid. The thought was so beautiful it hurt. Then, at the edge of the 4th hour, a car slowed. Kara's whole body went cold. It was a dark sedan, and it slowed as it passed the motel, and she watched it roll past their row of rooms, and she watched. She was sure of it, almost sure, mostly sure. Its brake lights flare for half a second as it passed their car parked around the back, just visible from the road at that one angle she'd thought was hidden. The car kept going, down the highway, out of sight. She sat frozen, heart hammering, telling herself it was nothing, a lost driver, a local, anything. But Nico had said any car that passes more than once, and 3 minutes later she counted them, 3 full minutes, her eyes never leaving the road. The same dark sedan came back from the other direction. Slower this time. And this time it pulled into the far end of the lot and stopped, and its lights went off, and nobody got out. She woke Nico the way he'd told her to, a hand on his chest, no light, her mouth at his ear. A car came past twice. It's parked at the far end now, lights off, nobody out. 3 minutes apart. He was awake and alert between one breath and the next, no grogginess, the survivor snapping into place. He moved to the window without turning on a light, looked through the gap for 10 silent seconds. "That's not local," he murmured. "That's a man waiting to be sure before he moves." His mind was already working, fast and cold. He's confirming the car's ours. He'll wait, watch for movement, then come to the door, or wait for us to leave and take us in the lot. He turned to her, and his voice was very calm, which frightened her more than panic would have. "Get your shoes on. We're going out the bathroom window. Now. Quiet." "The car." "We leave the car. The car's burned the second he made it." He was already moving, gathering the bag, the phones. "There's a field behind this place, and a frontage road past it. We go on foot, we stay low, we get to the road, we flag down anything that moves, and we pay them whatever they want to drive us to the next town." He pressed the prosecutor's number into her hand again. "And if we get split up, if anything happens, you call heirs, and you don't look back. Promise me again." "I promise." Her hands were shaking now, the doctor's steadiness finally cracking. "Nico." "I know." He cupped her face for 1 second, one stolen second, in the dark of a dying motel room, with a killer in the parking lot. "I know. We're going to make it. Now climb." She climbed. The bathroom window was small and stiff and opened onto the cold dark of a field gone to weeds behind the motel. Kara went first. Nico lifted her, fed her through, and she dropped down into the wet grass on the other side, the breath knocked out of her, her heart slamming. Nico came after, larger, the frame scraping his shoulders, and then he was beside her in the dark, low, his hand finding hers. "Don't run," he breathed. "Running draws the eye. We move fast and low and steady toward those lights." He nodded at a faint glow far across the field, the frontage road, headlights crawling along it. "Stay in the dark between us and the road. Go." They went. The field was longer than it looked. The ground was uneven, holes and ruts hidden in the weeds, and twice Kara nearly went down. The cold cut through her clothes. Behind them, the motel sat low and quiet, its neon sign buzzing, and she didn't dare look back to see if the dark sedan had moved, if a door had opened, if a man was crossing the lot toward a room that was now empty. They were halfway across when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a car door, distant, soft, but unmistakable in the country silence. Then another. Two of them, she thought. Not one. Two. Nico had heard it too. His grip on her hand tightened. Faster, he breathed, not running. Faster. They moved faster. The road glow grew closer, the individual headlights resolving now, cars passing every half-minute or so. Close. So close. 100 yards. 80. Behind them, a flashlight beam swept the field. It cut across the weeds in a long white arc, searching, and Nico pulled her down flat into the grass and lay over her, his body covering hers, and they pressed into the cold, wet earth and didn't breathe while the beam swept past, over them, around them, the light skating across the tops of the weeds, inches above their heads. It moved on, searching the wrong section. The men were working from the motel outward, methodical, and they'd guessed the lovers had gone the other way first. "When I say," Nico breathed into her ear, his weight warm and solid above her, "we crawl. Toward the road. Stay flat. Don't lift your head." A beat. Now. They crawled. Through the wet grass and the cold mud, elbows and knees, the road getting closer, the beam sweeping behind them, but always a few seconds late, a few yards wide. Kara's hands were freezing, her dress was soaked, and she had never in her life been so completely focused on a single thing, the dark line of the frontage road and the headlights crawling along it. 60 yards. 40. And then a car on the road slowed. For one heart-stopping moment, she thought it was them, more of them, that they'd been flanked. But the car was a pickup, old, and it slowed not because of them, but because of a turn. And Nico made a decision in a fraction of a second. "Up," he said. "Run, now, to that truck, go!" They came up out of the grass and ran, full out now, no more caution, the time for caution gone, across the last 40 yards, and behind them a voice shouted, and the flashlight beam swung and locked onto them, and a man started running, and Nico shoved Kara ahead of him toward the slowing pickup, and she hit the road and threw herself into the headlights, waving both arms. The truck stopped. An old man, a farmer, his face a mask of alarm in the dashlight. "Please," Kara gasped, wrenching the passenger door open. "Please, there are men. They're going to hurt us. Please." Nico was there, shoving her up into the cab, climbing in after, the two of them crushing the old farmer against his own door. "Drive," Nico said, and there was something in his voice. The boss, the survivor, 32 years of command compressed into a single word that made the old man stamp on the gas without a question. "Just drive, fast, I'll pay you, drive." The truck lurched forward. In the side mirror, Kara saw two men reach the road behind them, saw one raise his arm, and Nico shoved her head down below the dash an instant before something cracked against the back of the truck. Not a gunshot, she realized later. Or maybe it was. The old man's radio was up too loud to be sure. And then they were around the bend and accelerating, and the men were gone from the mirror. "Madre di Dio," the old farmer kept saying. "Madre di Dio. What is this? Who are you people?"
"We're nobody," Nico said, his voice steadying, his hand reaching for his cash. "We were never here.
There's $2,000 in this bag. It's yours if you drive us to the next town with a bus station and forget our faces. Can you do that? The old man looked at the cash, looked at Kara, soaked and shaking and terrified, looked at Nico's flat, dangerous eyes, and made the only choice a sensible man makes. 2 towns over, he said. Bigger station, and I never saw nobody. 2 towns over, Nico agreed. They rode in silence after that, the heater roaring, Kara pressed against Nico's side, both of them caked in mud, both of them shaking now that the running was over and the body could finally feel what it had been through. Nico's arm was around her, hard, and she could feel his heart going like a hammer against her shoulder, and she realized that for all his terrible calm, he had been every bit as afraid as she was. He'd just been afraid and functional, which was, she understood now, the thing the family had made of him, the thing he was trying to unmake. "You said they wouldn't find us this fast," she whispered. "I was wrong." His jaw was tight. The car. They must have flagged the favour. The man I borrowed it from. Someone leaned on him. He stared out at the dark road. We can't trust anyone anymore. Not one more favour, not one more name from the old life. From here, it's just us. He looked down at her. Just you and me, Kara, and a bus station, and a phone call we make the second we're somewhere with people. To Reyes, to Reyes. He pulled her tighter. It's time to surface. We've used up the running. Now we gamble on the law. The bus station 2 towns over was open all night, a fluorescent box full of vending machines and exhausted travellers. And it was, Nico judged, exactly the kind of public, crowded, camera-light place where nobody would dare move on them. He bought 2 tickets to a city 4 hours away, paying cash, faces down. Not because they intended to take the bus, but because tickets bought them a reason to be there, a reason to sit, a reason to look like everyone else. Then, in the cold pre-dawn, in the corner of a bus station bathroom where she could lock the door, Kara made the call that would decide whether they lived. She'd argued about who should make it. Nico had wanted to. She'd refused. "If it's a trap," she said, "if the line's compromised, if someone's listening, they want you, Nico, your voice, your name. If I make the call and it goes wrong, I'm a hysterical woman they can't identify. You make it, and you've just told a tapped line exactly where the cooperating witness is." She'd held out her hand for the phone. "I'm the safe one. Let me be useful." He'd hated it. He'd given her the phone. So she dialed the number on the folded paper, Reyes, direct line, and she stood in a locked bus station bathroom with her heart in her throat and listened to it ring. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice, instantly alert despite the hour. "This is Reyes?" Kara closed her eyes. "My name is Kara O'Brien," she said. "I'm with Nico Ferrante. The program is compromised. There's a leak inside it." Men came to the safe house early, the morning after the deal was signed. We ran. We've been running for 2 days. Tonight, 2 men found us at a motel 400 miles south of Boston. We barely got out. We have no one left to trust. And Nico said, "You're the only person who can pull us in clean." There was a sharp silence on the line. Then Reyes's voice came back, fast and low and absolutely focused. "Where are you right now? Exact location." Kara hesitated, every instinct screaming. "How do I know you're not the leak?" A pause. To her credit, Reyes didn't bristle. "You don't," the prosecutor said. "So here's how you'll know. I'm going to tell you something only the people in that signing room know."
The deal we made guarantees one thing that isn't about Ferrante at all. It's a sealed exclusion signed by the US Attorney for a person who was never an informant and whose name never appears in any file. The whole point of that clause was to protect a doctor. A beat. "Your name is in a sealed annex no one gets to read, Miss O'Brien. Not the agents, not the handlers, not the program. Just me and the US Attorney. If the leak came from someone who'd seen your name, they came for Ferrante alone, because they wouldn't know about you. But men came for both of you tonight, which tells me something I need you to hear." Her voice hardened. "The leak isn't from the deal. It's from the family's own people guessing who you are. Which means the program itself may be clean. It's the protective detail, the local pieces, the people who knew the safe house address. I can route around them. I can pull you in through a channel that never touched Boston. But I need where you are, and I need it now, because every minute you're in the open is a minute they're closing in." Kara's mind raced through it. The logic, the tells, the things a trap wouldn't bother to construct. It hung together. It was exactly the kind of careful, lawyerly reasoning that couldn't be faked by someone improvising a kill. And underneath the logic, the simpler thing, she had to gamble on someone. They could not run forever. Nico had said it himself. They'd used up the running. "There's a bus station," she said, and she told her where. "Don't take the bus," Reyes said immediately. "Stay in the station. Public, lit, people around. You've done exactly right. I'm going to send a team. Not the Boston program. A team out of the regional field office 2 hours from you. People who have never heard the name Ferrante, who'll be told only that they're escorting a protected federal witness. They'll have a phrase." Reyes paused. "When they reach you, they'll say, 'Trastevere.' If anyone approaches you and doesn't say that word, they're not mine, and you run. Do you understand? Trastevere." Kara's breath caught. The neighborhood his great-grandmother came from. The thing he'd told no one. The thing he'd whispered in the car. "How do you know that word?" she whispered. "Because when Ferrante negotiated this deal," Reyes said, and there was something almost gentle in it now, he asked for exactly one thing for himself that wasn't about safety. He asked if the placement ever allowed it to be sent somewhere specific. He said it like a man asking for something he didn't believe he'd get. I wrote it in the margin of my notes. A pause. "He asked for Rome, Miss O'Brien. He asked for a neighborhood called Trastevere. So that's your phrase. Nobody hunting you would ever know to say it. He gave it to me himself 3 days ago, before any of this. Now sit tight. My people will be there inside 2 hours. Stay in the light. And Miss O'Brien," Reyes's voice dropped, "tell Ferrante his information held. Every name on that drive checked out. He gave us the case of the century. We're going to keep our end. I'm going to keep our end. Sit tight." The line went dead. Kara stood in the bathroom, the phone in her hand, tears running down her muddy face. And she laughed. A broken, disbelieving, overflowing laugh. Because 3 days ago, in a room she'd never seen, before any of the running and the field and the flashlights, the man she loved had quietly asked the federal government for a city. Their city. The one he told her about in the dark of the car, like a secret he'd never spoken aloud. He'd been planning their life, even as he dismantled his own. She unlocked the door and walked out into the fluorescent glare of the bus station.
And there he was, sitting in the moulded plastic chair where she'd left him, watching the doors, his hand near where a weapon would have been if he still carried one, ready to die for her in a vending machine way station in the middle of nowhere. She walked straight to him and took his face in her muddy hands and kissed him in front of the whole exhausted station.
"You asked for Trastevere," she said against his mouth, crying and laughing at once. 3 days ago, you asked for Rome." Nico Ferrante, who had betrayed his family and outrun an assassin and not slept in 2 days, looked up at the woman he loved with an expression of such naked, exhausted hope that it broke her heart. "I didn't think we'd live to see it," he admitted quietly, "but I wanted it on the record, in case." He pulled her down into his lap, held her hard against him, buried his face in her muddy hair. "In case there was a version where we made it." "There is," she whispered. "Reyes is sending people, clean people. 2 hours. There's a version, Nico. We're in it." 2 hours is nothing. 2 hours is an episode of television, a long lunch, a slow shift. 2 hours waiting in a bus station for people who will either save your life or end it is the longest stretch of time that exists. They sat in the corner, backs to the wall, where they could see both doors. Nico had positioned them with the unconscious precision of a man who had spent his life calculating exits. Kara sat against his side, his arm around her, and they watched every person who came through the doors with the flat, assessing attention of prey that has learned the shapes of predators. A trucker came in for coffee, a young mother with a sleeping toddler, 2 college kids arguing about a missed connection, an old woman with a rolling suitcase. Each one made Kara's pulse spike, each one resolved into nothing, into the ordinary, tired humanity of a bus station at 4 in the morning. "Talk to me," she said. The same thing she'd said in the car, because the silence was unbearable. "Tell me about Rome again. The real Rome. What we'll actually do." So Nico talked, low, his mouth near her ear, painting it for both of them like a man laying down a floor over an abyss. "We'll have new names," he said. "I don't know what yet. They assign them. Something Italian, probably, since that's where we'll be. I'll be a man who came back to his grandmother's country. You'll be, I don't know, a doctor, maybe, eventually, once the documents are deep enough. You're too good at it to waste." He stroked her hair. "We'll find a place in Trastevere, if we can, or near it, somewhere with a window that gets the evening light. My great-grandmother said the light comes down the alleys like it's pouring." "I want to see if she was right." "She was right," Kara murmured. "Homesick people are always right about the light." "In the mornings, I'll go to the market. I'll learn to argue about the price of tomatoes in Italian." A faint laugh. "I've spent my life arguing about much worse things. Tomatoes will be a relief." His arm tightened. "And no one will be afraid of me. That's the part I can't quite believe. I'll walk down a street and the people on it won't know what I am. They'll just see a man. Maybe a man whose wife is a doctor. Maybe a man who's happy." His voice roughened. "I don't know how to be that man yet, Kara. I've never been him. I'm going to be bad at it. I'm going to flinch at doorways and check mirrors and sleep badly for years. You should know what you're getting." She turned her face up to his. "I'm an ER doctor. I'm getting a man with the worst case of hypervigilance I've ever seen, and the worst sleep hygiene in Europe." She kissed his jaw. "I'll fix you slowly. It's what I do. I take broken things
and I keep them alive long enough to heal. Is that what I am? A broken thing you're keeping alive? You're the man I love, she said simply. The broken part is just a diagnosis. Diagnoses aren't destinies, Nico. They're just where you start the treatment. He kissed her then, slow and deep, in the fluorescent light of the bus station. And for a moment, the two doors and the predators and the order written in old language all fell away, and there was only the two of them, muddy and exhausted, and absurdly, impossibly, in love. At the 90-minute mark, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Kara felt Nico go to stone beside her. His hand moved her slightly behind him, his body angling between her and the door, every muscle ready. Two men got out, dark jackets, easy movements, the unmistakable bearing of people who carried weapons for a living. They came through the doors and scanned the station once, fast and professional, and their eyes landed on the couple in the corner. Kara's heart stopped. The men crossed the floor toward them. Nico rose slowly, putting himself fully in front of her now, and she saw his hands open at his sides, saw him measure the distance, saw the survivor calculate odds that were terrible. Two armed men, no weapon, a woman to protect. The first man stopped 6 feet away. He was older, steady-eyed, and he looked at Nico and then past him at Kara, and he said in a flat, clear voice, "Trastevere." The word landed like a struck bell. Kara made a sound that was half sob and grabbed Nico's arm, and Nico didn't relax all at once, couldn't. The body that had been braced for death for 2 days didn't simply switch off. But something in his shoulders dropped, some impossible tension uncoiling by a single degree, and he let out a long breath. "Reyes sent you," he said. "Reyes sent us." The man held up a badge, let them both look at it. "We don't know who you are, and we don't want to. Our orders are to get 2 protected witnesses to a secure federal facility 2 hours from here without touching anyone or anything connected to Boston. There's a doctor standing by. You both look like hell. After that, you're someone else's problem, and I mean that as a kindness." A flicker of something almost human crossed his face as he took in their state. The mud, the exhaustion, the way the woman was gripping the man's arm like she'd never let go. "You folks have had a night. Let's get you somewhere with no doors to watch." "No doors to watch," Nico repeated, and the words seemed to undo something in him. He looked down at Kara, and his composure finally cracked. Not into fear this time, but into the thing he'd been holding back for 2 days, 2 weeks, maybe 32 years. Relief so total it looked like grief. "We made it," he said, and his voice broke on it. "Kara, we made it." She pulled his face down to hers and held it there, forehead to forehead, both of them shaking. "We made it," she agreed. "Now let's go get clean, you impossible man. And then, let's go home, to a home you've never seen." They walked out of the bus station into the cold pre-dawn, between the 2 federal agents, into the black SUV, away from the order and the council and the city of cold grey water. And as the SUV pulled onto the highway and the bus station shrank behind them, Nico Ferrante looked out the window at the dark and felt, for the first time in his entire life, the specific and unfamiliar sensation of being driven toward something instead of away. The secure facility was somewhere in the middle of nowhere,
a low building behind two fences, and they slept there for 14 hours straight. First the doctor checking them over, cleaning the scrapes, the IV fluids for Nico whose body had finally collapsed, and then sleep, the dead, dreamless sleep of people who have stopped running. When Kara woke, Reyes was there. The prosecutor was younger than Kara had pictured, early 40s, sharp-suited even here, eyes that had clearly also not slept. She sat across a small table from Kara in a windowless room and slid a cup of coffee across. "The arrests happened," Reyes said without preamble. 18 hours ago. All 5 council members, 31 others. We hit them simultaneously at 4 a.m. They never saw it coming because Ferrante's information was that good. A grim satisfaction crossed her face. The Ferrante family as an organization ceased to exist this morning. The order on you two died with the men who gave it. There's no one left to send anyone. You understand what that means? Kara's hands tightened on the cup. It means we're safe. It means the acute threat is over. There are always loose ends, old loyalties, a cousin somewhere with a grudge. That's why the program is still the program. You'll still relocate, still take new names, still cut contact with your old life. But the men actively hunting you are in federal custody and not getting out. Reyes paused. I wanted to tell you that in person. You earned it. Kara nodded slowly, absorbing it. Then, carefully, there was a man, Salvatore. He warned us. He called Nico and told him to run, when he was supposed to be the one to... She couldn't finish it. Reyes's expression shifted, went carefully neutral. Salvatore Aiello. A pause. We have him in custody too. He's on Ferrante's information, like everyone else. He was part of the family for 40 years. There was no keeping him out of the indictments. Another pause, and her voice softened by a degree. But there's a note in his file. Ferrante told us in his proffer everything Aiello had done, and also that Aiello refused a direct order to kill him and called to warn him instead. That kind of thing matters at sentencing. It's not nothing. It's the difference between dying in prison and not. She met Kara's eyes. Ferrante protected the old man the only way he could. With the truth. Tell him that when you see him. Tell him Aiello's lawyer already has the proffer note. He did right by him. Kara's throat tightened. She thought of Nico saying he's going to die in prison and it's because of me. And she thought of how this small mercy, a note in a file, was the most a man like Nico could offer the man who raised him. It would have to be enough. It would never be enough. There's one more thing, Reyes said, and it's the hard one. She folded her hands. Your brother. Kara went still. Daniel knows you're alive and safe. I told him myself an hour ago. He'd been... Reyes chose the word carefully. He'd been in a bad way. He found out the safe house had been compromised and that you'd both vanished, and for 2 days he thought you were dead. He nearly tore the building apart trying to find you. She let that sit. He wants to see you, before you go. The program allows one supervised goodbye for immediate family, here, before relocation. After that, she didn't finish. After that, I never see him again, Kara said. Her voice came out steady. She didn't know how. After that, contact is essentially impossible. For your safety and his. Maybe, years from now,
something supervised, something rare. But you should plan your life as though this is goodbye. Reyes stood. He's in the next room, Miss O'Brien. Take whatever time you need. Daniel was standing when she came in. He looked terrible, grey, unshaven, 10 years older than the last time, the manic obsession burned out of him and replaced by something hollowed and quiet. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the small room. Then Kara crossed it and threw her arms around her brother, and Daniel made a broken sound and held her so hard it hurt. And they stood there, the last two O'Briens, the fireman's children, holding on. "I thought you were dead," he kept saying into her hair. "2 days, Kara. I thought I killed you. I put you in that. I asked you to do that, and then I couldn't protect you, and I thought—" "I'm here," she said. "I'm here, Danny. I'm okay." They sat down eventually across the small table, and they talked the way you talk when you know it's the last time and there isn't enough time in the world. "He turned himself in for you," Daniel said at last. He didn't look at her. "Ferrante, I've thought about it for 3 days. He walked into my building unarmed and gave me everything. 6 years of work, the whole family, Salvatore. And the only thing he asked for was you, your safety, your freedom." He laughed, bitter and amazed. "The most dangerous man in Boston, and he laid it all down for a girl from Southie, for my little sister." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were wet. "I wanted to hate him. I've hated his name for 6 years, and he goes and does the one thing I can't argue with. He saved you, twice, from his own people." "He's not what you think, Danny." "I know." Daniel rubbed his face. "That's the hell of it. I built my whole life on hating that family, and the last one standing turned out to be a man who'd burn it all down for love." He shook his head slowly. "Dad would have—" He stopped. "I don't know what Dad would have thought, but Mum. Mum would have taken one look at how that man watches you, and she'd have set a place for him at the table." Kara laughed through her tears. "She would have. She'd have fed him to death and interrogated him about his intentions." "His intentions are obvious." Daniel reached across the table and took her hands. "Kara, listen to me. I don't get to be your brother anymore. Not the way I was. I don't get Sunday dinners or your wedding or any of it. They're taking you somewhere I can't follow, and I don't get to know where." His voice cracked completely. "So I need you to promise me something, and I need you to mean it. Be happy. Wherever they put you, whoever you become, be happy. Build the life I can't watch you build. Love that impossible man and let him love you, and don't spend 1 second of it grieving me. Because I'll know, somehow I'll know, and it'll be the only thing that makes any of this bearable. Promise me you'll be happy." Kara held her brother's hands across the table and made the hardest promise of her life. "I promise," she said. "I promise, Danny. I'll be happy. For both of us." They held each other one last time, and then a quiet agent opened the door, and Daniel O'Brien let go of his sister's hands and walked out of her life so that she could keep it. They flew at night on a government plane with documents that said they were other people. Nico Ferrante became Matteo Conti. Kara O'Brien became Lucia Conti. Husband and wife, The program had married them on paper to simplify the placement, and when the agent handed them the documents and explained it, flat and bureaucratic, Nico had looked at the marriage certificate with his fake name beside her fake name and gone very quiet. "We can change it," the agent had said, misreading. "If the marital cover doesn't work for you, we can build you as—" "No," Nico said. "Leave it." He'd looked at Kara, and there was a question in it. "Leave it," Kara agreed softly, "though I'd like the real version someday, with the right names, whoever we end up being." "You'll have it," Nico said. "I promise you that. A real one. The right names." They didn't speak much on the flight. There was too much and too little. They held hands across the armrest and watched the dark Atlantic pass beneath them. And somewhere over the ocean, Kara fell asleep on his shoulder, and Nico stayed awake. Old habit, the hypervigilance she'd promised to fix slowly, and watched the woman he'd given up an empire for breathe against him, and thought about how strange it was to be flying toward a life instead of away from a death. He thought about Salvatore in a cell. He thought about the council in their separate cells, the men who'd held him at his baptism. He thought about the family that had existed for 100 years and ceased to exist in a single 4 a.m. raid because of a thumb drive he'd carried into a federal building in his breast pocket. He felt the grief of it. It was real. It would always be real. You don't unmake 100 years of blood and not mourn it, even when it deserved unmaking. But then Kara shifted in her sleep, and her hand tightened on his, and the grief made room for the other thing, the unfamiliar thing, the thing he was going to spend the rest of his life learning the name of. The plane landed at Fiumicino in the grey of early morning. They were met by an Italian liaison and an American marshal, processed through a private channel and driven into the city as the sun came up. And there it was. Rome rose around them in the dawn, not the postcard Rome of monuments, but the living city, the ochre and umber and faded rows of the buildings, the green shutters, the laundry, the scooters threading through impossible streets, the church bells starting up, one after another, across the 7 hills. The light came up over it exactly the way his great-grandmother had said it would, soft, golden, ancient, pouring down the narrow streets like something liquid. Nico Ferrante, who was now Matteo Conti, looked out the car window at the city of his blood that he had never seen, and Kara watched him do it, and she watched 100 years of fear and obligation and cold grey Boston water drain slowly out of his face, replaced by something she had only ever seen in glimpses. Peace. The beginning of it, anyway. "She was right," he said quietly. "My great-grandmother. About the light." "She was right," Kara agreed, and took his hand. They were given an apartment in Trastevere. It wasn't grand. After a lifetime in a glass penthouse 50 floors above Boston, Nico now lived in 3 small rooms on the 3rd floor of a 400-year-old building, with worn stone stairs and a temperamental water heater, and a window, one window, in the bedroom that looked down a narrow cobbled alley toward a tiny piazza with a fountain in it. In the evenings, the light came down that alley exactly the way it was supposed to. The first night, they stood at that window together and watched it pour gold over the stones, and Nico put his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her head and didn't say anything for a long time. "I don't know how to do this," he finally admitted, the same thing he'd said in the bus station. any of it. I've never had a small life. I've never had a window I just stood at. I've never had a Tuesday, Cara. I've had operations and meetings and 100 years of family. I don't know what to do with a Tuesday. We'll figure out Tuesdays together, she said. I'll teach you. They mostly involve coffee and arguing about what to make for dinner. I'm bad at small things. You'll get good at them. She turned in his arms to face him. You learn to run an empire at 28. You can learn to buy tomatoes. He laughed, and it was a different laugh than the old ones, lighter, less guarded, the laugh of Matteo Conti rather than Nico Ferrante. The tomatoes again. It always comes back to the tomatoes. That first week was strange and fragile. Nico flinched at doorways just as he'd warned her, checked mirrors that held nothing, woke at 3 a.m. with his heart pounding, and had to walk to the window and confirm the empty alley before he could breathe. Cara held him through it. She'd seen trauma. She knew it didn't heal on a schedule. She didn't try to rush him. She just stayed. The steady thing, the fixed point. The doctor who took broken things and kept them alive long enough to heal. And slowly, over days, then weeks, the city did its work. He learned the market. He learned, exactly as he dreamed in a fleeing car, to argue about the price of tomatoes in halting, improving Italian. And the old woman at the stall came to know him, to save him the good ones, to call him il bostoniano with affection, because his accent gave him away. He learned the names of his neighbours. He learned which cafe made the coffee Cara liked, and he brought it to her in the mornings. And she'd told him once that he always knew a guy. And now the guy was a 14-year-old behind a counter who'd started giving Matteo a free cornetto on Sundays because the quiet American tipped well and never made trouble. Never made trouble. The man other people were afraid of, who had spent his whole life being the thing in the dark. And now he was just il bostoniano, the quiet one, the one whose wife was learning Italian to volunteer at the clinic, the one who stood at his window in the evening and watched the light come down the alley like he'd never seen anything so beautiful in his life. Because he hadn't. The trial happened without them in the room. Nico testified by video from a secure location, his face and voice altered for the broadcast feed, though not for the jury. Day after day, methodically dismantling the empire he'd been born into. Cara was never mentioned. Reyes kept her word, kept the US attorney's word, and the sealed annex stayed sealed. As far as the trial knew, as far as history would ever know, the Ferrante family fell because its young boss turned, and no one ever explained why. And the speculation in the Boston papers ran for months, and never once landed on the truth. The truth was 3 small rooms in Trastevere and a woman learning Italian. It was hard on him, the testimony. For weeks at a time he'd disappear into it, flown to the secure facility, gone for days, and he'd come back to Rome grey and silent, having spent the day describing crimes committed by men he'd loved, and Cara would meet him at the airport channel and take him home and not ask, just hold him until he could speak. Salvatore testified today, he told her one night, after the worst of those trips. He was sitting on the edge of their bed, his head in his hands. Not against me. There's no me to testify against. I'm a ghost. Against the council. He turned too in the end. His lawyer worked the proffer note, the one Reyes told you about. He's going to get 15 years instead of dying inside. A long breath. I watched him on the feed. He's old, Kara. He looked so old.
And when they asked him about me, about the boss who turned, he said,
Nico's voice cracked. He said, the boy did right. He's the only one of us who ever did right. On the record, in front of everyone. He pressed his palms into his eyes. He called me the boy. After everything, he still called me the boy. Kara sat down beside him and pulled his head onto her shoulder. He loves you, she said. That's what that was. A man who loves you, telling the world you did right. That's the goodbye he could give you. I put him in a cell. You gave him 15 years instead of a coffin, and you gave him the truth that lets him hold his head up in it. She stroked his hair. There was no clean version, Nico. There was never going to be a version where everyone you loved walked away happy. There was only the version where you walked away, and where I did, and where Salvatore got 15 years instead of either dying or being a man who murdered the boy he raised. You gave everyone the least terrible ending that existed. That's not betrayal. That's the most love a man in your position could possibly give. He was quiet for a long time. How are you always right about this? He finally said. I'm not always right. I'm just good at triage. She kissed the top of his head. You learn to look at a disaster and find the version where the most people live. It's the same skill. I just do it with bodies, and you did it with a family. The convictions came down 6 months after they'd arrived in Rome, all 5 council members, decades each. The 31 others, sentences across the board. The Boston field office held a press conference, and Reyes stood at the podium and called it the most significant organized crime prosecution in the city's history. And somewhere in the careful language was a single line about a cooperating witness whose identity would remain permanently sealed for their protection. Nico watched it on a laptop in their kitchen in Trastevere, Kara's chin on his shoulder, and when it was over, he closed the laptop and sat very still. It's done, he said. It's actually done. There's no family anymore. There's no order. There's no one left who'd even know to look for us. He turned to her, and his eyes were wet and disbelieving. We're free, Kara. We're actually free. I keep waiting to not believe it, and instead I just believe it more. She kissed him. Then start believing the next part. What's the next part? The part where you stop bracing for it to be taken away. She framed his face in her hands. You've spent 6 months waiting for the other shoe, flinching at doorways, checking the alley at 3 a.m., and I've let you because you needed it, because that's how trauma works. Her thumbs stroked his cheekbones. But the trial's over, Nico. The men are in prison. The danger's gone. At some point, you have to let your body know it. At some point, you have to actually live here, in this apartment, with this woman, in this light. Not just survive here. She smiled. You asked me once how to be a man who's happy. This is how. You decide the danger's over, and you let yourself want things again. Small things. Tuesdays. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into the drawer of the kitchen table, the cheap little table they'd bought at a market, that wobbled, that he'd never bothered to fix, because some part of him hadn't believed they'd stay long enough to need it level. And he took out a small box. Kara went still. I bought this 3 months ago, he said, at a little shop near the Pantheon. The man didn't speak English, and my Italian was terrible, and it took an hour, and we both nearly gave up. He opened it. A simple gold ring, old, the kind of thing you'd find in a shop that had been there for centuries. I've carried it around for 3 months, waiting to feel like I'd earned the right to ask, like I had to finish the testimony first, be safe first, be a good enough man first.
His voice shook. And you just told me to stop bracing and start wanting things. So, he took a breath. Lucia Conti is a name the government gave you. But I'd like to ask Cara O'Brien, the real one, the one who scowled at a sailboat, if she'd marry the real me. Not the name they gave me, not the cover, but me, Nico, the man who has nothing left to offer her but himself. If she'd marry me, for real, with the right names. He looked up at her, terrified, hopeful, undone. Will you? Cara O'Brien, the real one, the one who'd scowled at a sailboat in a 42nd floor ballroom a lifetime and an ocean ago, looked down at the man who had betrayed an empire, outrun an assassin, and dismantled 100 years of blood, all of it for her, and who now sat at a wobbly market table in 3 small rooms in Rome, asking with shaking hands for the one thing he'd never let himself believe he could have.
Yes, she said, you impossible man, yes. They married in autumn, in a small church in Trastevere that had stood for 600 years, with a priest who knew them only as Matteo and Lucia, and a congregation of exactly 4 people. There was the old woman from the market, who'd been told the quiet Bostoniano was getting married, and had wept, and insisted on coming, and brought a basket of the good tomatoes as a gift, which made Nico laugh so hard he had to step outside. There was the 14-year-old from the cafe, scrubbed and uncomfortable in a borrowed jacket, who'd appointed himself something between a friend and a mascot. There was the woman who ran the clinic where Cara had begun, slowly, with falsified but deep credentials, to work again, and who had come to love the steady, brilliant American who could read a patient across a room. And there was, by careful arrangement, by a string Reyes had quietly pulled, because she was a woman who kept her word in ways large and small, a video link. A laptop on a chair near the altar, and on its screen, in a supervised federal room half a world away, Daniel O'Brien. Cara hadn't known. Nico had arranged it in secret over 3 months of careful, monitored requests, and when she walked into the small church and saw her brother's face on the screen, she stopped dead in the aisle and put her hand over her mouth and cried before the ceremony even began. "Hey, stranger," Daniel said, his own voice thick. "You look beautiful. Mum would have—" He couldn't finish. He didn't have to. He couldn't be there. He could never be there, not really, not in the way a brother should walk his sister down an aisle. But he could be a face on a screen, watching, for the length of one ceremony that the program would never officially acknowledge, arranged by a man who'd once been his enemy and had become, in the impossible way of things, the only person on earth he trusted to keep his sister safe. They said their vows. The real ones, in the names the government had given them, because those were the only legal names they had. But Nico leaned in before the priest could finish and murmured, just for her, just under the Latin, "Nico, to Cara, for real." And she whispered it back. The true names, spoken once, in a church, between only the 2 of them. The right names, the way he'd promised in a fleeing car and on a government plane and at a wobbly kitchen table.
When the priest pronounced them, Nico kissed her, and the four guests applauded, and on the laptop screen, Daniel O'Brien laughed and cried at once and said, "Okay, okay, Ferrante. You take care of her, or I find a way to Rome. Program be damned." "I'll take care of her," Nico said, looking into the screen at the brother of his wife, the man who'd hunted him for 6 years. "On my life. You have my word." "I know," Daniel said quietly. "That's the strange part. I actually believe you." A pause, the agent gone, just a brother now, an ocean away, getting his last few seconds. "Be happy, Kara. Both of you. I mean it. Be so happy, it's annoying." "We will," she promised. "We're already annoying." The screen held for one more moment. Her brother's face, drinking in the sight of her in a simple white dress in a 600-year-old church, banking it for all the years he'd have only memory. And then the link cut, on a schedule the program controlled, and they didn't. And Daniel O'Brien was gone. Kara stood looking at the dark laptop for a moment. Nico's arm came around her. "He came," she said softly. "You got him here. How did you—" "I asked Reyes for one thing," Nico said. "For our whole life, I'll only ever get to ask for a handful of things, given what we are now. I used one of them on this, on him being able to see it." He turned her gently to face him. "You gave up your brother for me, Kara. You crossed an ocean and took a new name and walked away from the only family you had left. And you did it for me. I couldn't give him back to you. Nobody can. But I could give you this, one ceremony, one goodbye that was also a beginning instead of just an ending." His voice roughened. "It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's what I had." She kissed him, there in the candle-lit church, with the old woman weeping into the tomatoes, and the cafe boy applauding, and the autumn light coming through 600-year-old windows. "It's enough," she said. "You impossible, dangerous, ridiculous man. It's more than enough." They walked out of the church as Matteo and Lucia Conti, husband and wife on paper, Nico and Kara in the only place it mattered, and the late afternoon light poured down the cobbled street of Trastevere, exactly the way his great-grandmother had promised, across 100 years and 1,000 homesick evenings. That night they stood at the one window in their bedroom and watched the light go down the alley toward the little piazza with the fountain. And Nico held his wife against him, and for the first time since the night he'd seen her laughing at a sailboat, he was not bracing for anything to be taken away. "I keep waiting to not believe it," he murmured into her hair, "and instead, I just believe it more." "That's called happiness," she said. "You'll get used to it. It mostly involves coffee and arguing about dinner and standing at windows watching the light. And Tuesdays. And Tuesdays." She turned in his arms. "We're going to have so many Tuesdays, Nico. Thousands of them. Ordinary, boring, beautiful Tuesdays. And not one of them is going to involve a gun or a council or a man following us in a car." She smiled. "I'm going to make you so bored, you're going to beg for the old excitement." "Never," he said, with total conviction. "I've had excitement. I had 32 years of excitement. It nearly killed us both." He kissed her forehead, her cheek, her mouth. "I want the boredom.
I want the Tuesdays. I want to grow old in 3 small rooms with a water heater that doesn't work and a wife who reads Patience across rooms and a window that gets the evening light. His arms tightened. I want all the small things. I spent my whole life thinking the small things were beneath a man like me. They're not beneath. They're above. They're everything. They're the thing all the power was supposed to buy and never could.
Outside, a church bell began to ring, and another answered it across the rooftops, and then another. The bells of Rome calling to each other across the 7 hills, the way they had for 2,000 years, indifferent and eternal, and somehow, tonight, sounding to 2 people at a window like nothing so much as celebration. 2 years later. The clinic in Trastevere was small and chronically underfunded, and Lucia Conti, Dr. Conti now, her credentials finally deep enough to be real, the programme having quietly built her a past that held up, was the best thing that had happened to it in a decade. She worked 4 days a week. She'd learned Italian the way she learned everything, fast and stubborn and unwilling to be wrong. And now she argued with patience in it, soothed children in it, told a frightened old man in it that his heart was strong and he'd see another summer. The neighbourhood loved her. La Dottoressa Americana, they called her, with the particular fierce affection Romans reserve for people who choose their city and then earn it. She came home in the evenings, up the worn stone stairs to 3 small rooms that had become, somehow, the whole world. Matteo would be cooking. This was the thing that still made her stop in the doorway sometimes and just look. Nico Ferrante, 4th-generation Mafia boss, the youngest in Boston's history, the man who'd ordered the things he could never say out loud, standing at a tiny stove in an apron, arguing with a pot of sauce. He'd taken to cooking the way he'd taken to everything in this new life, completely, seriously, with the focused intensity he'd once spent on survival. He made the old recipes, the ones the market woman taught him, the ones his great-grandmother might have made. He was, it turned out, very good at it. He'd had a lot of practice at paying attention to small things that mattered. "You're late," he said, not turning around, because he'd heard her on the stairs. He always heard her on the stairs. Some habits never fully left, and she'd decided she didn't mind this one. "There was a bus accident. The boy at the cafe said there was a bus accident." "Minor. Everyone's fine. 2 broken arms and a lot of yelling." She came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist and put her cheek against his back. "What are we arguing about for dinner?" "We're not arguing. I've decided. You'll like it." He covered her hands with one of his. "How was it, really?" "It was good." She closed her eyes. "It was a good day, Nico. Boring and good. I did my job, and nobody died, and I came home to you cooking and complaining about the boy at the cafe." She smiled against his back. "It was the most ordinary day in the world, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." He turned in her arms, the wooden spoon still in his hand, and looked down at her with the expression that 2 years had not worn away, would never wear away, she'd come to understand, the particular way this man looked at her, like she was the single fact in the room worth knowing, like she was the thing all the power and the danger and the 100 years of blood had been a long, wrong road toward. The obsession had never left him. She'd worried in the early days that that the intensity that had once squared off with a Russian mob boss over a touched chair would curdle in a small life.
that a man built for war would suffocate in 3 rooms and Tuesdays. It hadn't. It had simply turned, the way a river turns, all that ferocity pouring now into ordinary channels. He still watched the door. He still woke sometimes at 3 a.m., though less and less. He still loved her with a totality that would have frightened her in anyone else, and that she had come instead to understand as simply him. Nico didn't know how to do anything halfway, had never once in his life wanted something moderately, and she had decided long ago that she would rather be wanted like that, completely, dangerously, forever, than safely by anyone else.
"They tried to make me into a thing other people are afraid of," he said, apropos of nothing, the way he sometimes circled back to the old life without warning, exercising it in small pieces. My father, my grandfather, the family. They spent 32 years building a weapon. He set the spoon down. He put both hands on her face. And then a woman scowled at a sailboat, and the whole thing came apart. Because it turned out, underneath the weapon, there was just a man who wanted to stand at a window and watch the light come down an alley with someone he loved. "Are you sorry?" she asked. It was a question she'd never asked, not in 2 years, and she asked it now because some things you have to know. Ever? About any of it? The family? The life? The man you were going to be? The boss? The empire? You gave up everything, Nico. Everyone. You can never go back, never see Salvatore, never... She stopped. Are you ever sorry? Nico Ferrante looked at his wife in the kitchen of 3 small rooms in the city of his blood. In the golden hour, with the bells starting up across the rooftops and the sauce simmering and a whole ordinary evening stretching out ahead of them like a gift. I lost everything I was, he said slowly, and I'd do it again 10,000 times for one of these evenings. So no, I'm not sorry. He pulled her closer. I grieve it sometimes. Salvatore, the men, the boy I was before I understood what we were. Grief and regret aren't the same thing, cara. I grieve the family. I'll grieve it my whole life. But I have never once, not for a single second, regretted choosing you. His voice dropped to almost nothing. You were the only thing in 32 years that was ever really mine. Everything else belonged to the family. You were the one thing I chose. He kissed her, soft and certain. I'd burn it all down again. I'd burn 10 empires, for one window, for one alley, for one more ordinary Tuesday with you. She kissed him back, and the sauce nearly burned, and he swore in Italian, and she laughed, and they ate dinner at the wobbly little table which he had, eventually, after the wedding, finally gotten around to levelling, because they were staying, because there was no more in case, because this was the life now, and not a place they were passing through. Afterward they stood at the one window, as they did most evenings, his arms around her from behind, and watched the last of the light pour down the cobbled alley toward the little piazza with the fountain. It came down soft and golden and ancient, the way it had for 2,000 years, the way his great-grandmother had wept for across an ocean and a lifetime, the way she'd promised it would. She was right, Nico murmured. The same thing he'd said the first morning, the thing he said almost every evening now, a small, private liturgy. About the light. She was right, Kara agreed, leaning back into him. Somewhere across the ocean, in a city of cold grey water, a man named Daniel O'Brien kept a single photograph in his wallet that the program would have confiscated if they'd known about it. A still from a video link, blurry, of his sister in a white dress in a candle-lit church, laughing. He took it out sometimes, late, and looked at it, and he believed what the ridiculous, impossible, dangerous man had promised him. I'll take care of her, on my life. He'd believed it then, and he believed it still, and it was, just as he'd hoped it would be, the thing that made all of it bearable. And in 3 small rooms in Trastevere, in the warm last light of an ordinary Tuesday, the perfect enemy held his perfect enemy in his arms at a window, in a city that knew neither of their names and was, finally, impossibly, completely at peace. The bells rang on across the 7 hills. The light went down the alley. And they stayed.